Chapter 1895. As a martial arts expert of the younger generation, Yang Na's movements were naturally extremely fast. After rushing in front of Jeff, Yang Na took the opportunity to pull out a crossbow arrow and stabbed it into Jeff's body. This set of movements was neat and tidy, like moving clouds and flowing water. Whether it was for the viewing or the technique, everyone was amazed. When an archer fought a mage, she should have pulled away and kited them with the advantage of distance. However, Yang Na's close combat style had such an effect. It was truly amazing. Of course, to be able to stand in this arena, Jeff was naturally not an ordinary character. Pfft. Just as Yang Na's arrow stabbed into Jeff's head, Yang Na suddenly felt her hand lighten. The blow was clearly different from usual. It's fake. Yang Na's heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly pulled back. However, at this moment, Jeff, who was hit, suddenly twisted and turned into a vortex that swept towards Yang Na. Yang Na couldn't pull back in time, and her arm was caught by the twisted Jeff. Crack! The audience only heard the sound of bones breaking. Yang Na's arm was directly twisted into a fried dough twist by the twisted space shackle. She released a space trap. Once it was triggered, she could use space to bind the target. The scene in the arena made everyone's scalp tingle in the hearts of the audience. Yang Na, a woman who could cripple people's moves at the drop of a hat, was a terrifying existence like a demon king. They didn't expect that in just one round, this demon king's arm would be crippled. This was really the cycle of heaven's retribution. The battle between these two was much bloodier than the others. At the same time that Yang Na was bound by the space shackle, Jeff also appeared not far away from her. Looking at Yang Na, whose arm was firmly bound by space, Jeff's face revealed a cruel sneer. He suddenly crossed his hands, and a space crack appeared beside Yang Na. A spatial rift opened up and swallowed Yang Na whole. Dimensional space slash. This was Jeff's usual attack method. No matter how strong the opponent was, as long as they were hit, they would definitely be cut in half along with their equipment. There was absolutely no chance for the opponent to fight back. It's over. Seeing Jeff use this ultimate move, the audience all sighed. A top expert was a top expert. They didn't expect that such a strong person like Yang Na could only last 2 rounds in front of Jeff. However, such a result was not weak compared to others. After all, when dealing with others, Jeff would kill them in a single move. There was no room for exchange. Gotcha. However, just when everyone thought that Yang Na was going to be killed by Jeff in one move, a sudden crisp sound pierced everyone's ears. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw Yang Na's left hand grabbing onto her right arm that was bound by the spatial shackles. With a tug, the entire right arm was torn off by Yang Na. Holy shit! Seeing this scene, whether it was the audience below the stage or the contestants on the stage, even the ragtag team members, their jaws dropped to the ground. Under such circumstances, anyone else would have taken one of Jeff's skills head-on. Who would have thought that Yang Na's personality would be so unyielding as to choose to sever her own arm? Although there was no pain in the game, no normal person would dare to tear off their own arm. Cutting off one's wrist was just an illusion to modern people. To be able to do this, not only did one need courage, but one also needed a decisive mentality to make a timely decision before a major event. Yang Na was just a little girl, yet she was able to decisively sacrifice an arm for the sake of victory. Such an iron-blooded act was simply shocking. What was even more unbelievable was that Yang Na remained expressionless from beginning to end. She didn't show the slightest hint of panic. Even under such circumstances, she was still able to maintain such a calm attitude. It was truly shocking. This woman was truly too terrifying. Jeff could be considered an expert with extremely strong mental fortitude, but seeing Yang Na's ferocious actions, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. She could be so cruel to herself. If he forced her to sever an arm, wouldn't that be without the restraint of the spatial shackles? Yang Na finally regained her freedom. Freed from the shackles, Yang Na's figure flashed, and she jumped out of the range of Jeff's dimensional slash skill. Jeff's spatial magic wasn't without limitations. Spatial magic actually didn't have any offensive skills. Dimensional slash was essentially a teleportation skill. It was just that the way it was used was different, so it became an offensive skill. Because of this, dimensional slash didn't have the effect of locking onto a target. As long as the target moved, this skill would miss. In other words, dimensional slash could only be used on a mobile target. Quan Jin's team had already discovered this a long time ago. If Lock Bai was at the side using the gravity spell to control the situation, the two of them would definitely cooperate seamlessly. However, with only Jeff attacking, it would be more difficult to hit the target. The reason why Jeff could hit the target so easily in the match the day before was mainly because the target didn't understand spatial magic, and had been careless. If they knew Jeff's weakness like Yang Na, Jeff wouldn't have won so easily. After losing the target, the spatial crack automatically closed. In an instant, Yang Na appeared in front of Jeff. With the previous lesson, Yang Na naturally didn't dare to test the waters with her hands. Instead, she raised her crossbow and shot an arrow at Jeff. Jeff's reaction was also extremely fast. He waved his staff in front of him and drew a teleportation door, blocking Yang Na's arrow. At the same time, the other side of the teleportation door appeared above Yang Na's head. Yang Na's arrow entered the teleportation door in front of Jeff and appeared above Yang Na's head. Yang Na instinctively took a step back, and the arrow pierced the place where Yang Na had just been standing. Humph! Yang Na looked at the arrow on the ground and then at Jeff, who was not far away. Her eyes immediately narrowed into slits. Although the motley crew didn't have the murderous aura that Wang Yu had, they could still feel the murderous aura permeating the arena when they saw the expression on Yang Na's face. Before Jeff could react, Yang Na had already rushed in front of Jeff with an expressionless face. Her face was almost touching Jeff's. Jeff jumped in fright when he saw Yang Na suddenly appear in front of him. Jeff was a proper mage, a proper long-range mage. Being so close to someone was an instinct for him to panic. Melee mages only existed in novels after all. Yang Na also knew that Jeff's spatial magic was strange, so she naturally wouldn't attack him with her bare hands. Just as Jeff was panicking, Yang Na raised her crossbow to his head and pulled the trigger. Chapter 1896. In Rebirth, every class had its own minimum attack range, which was linked to the length of the weapon. A crossbow was a small and exquisite weapon. Its attack range was only slightly higher than a pair of boxing gloves. A staff, on the other hand, was relatively long. Its attack range was almost the same as a warrior's longsword. Therefore, a mage who was in close range only had two choices: either throw away the staff and cast spells with bare hands, or turn around and run. In the game, a weapon was the most important thing to a player. It was more precious than their life. It was unrealistic to throw away the weapon. However, a mage like Jeff couldn't outrun an archer who was famous for her speed. As a spatial mage, Jeff had skills such as teleportation. However, he had already used it just now and it was still on cooldown. Yang Na was so close to Jeff that it was impossible for him to open a teleportation door and escape. Left with no choice, Jeff could only bite the bullet and receive Yang Na's arrow. Every player would have an attack stun, and Yang Na was no exception. After the arrow was released, Yang Na's body trembled slightly. Jeff took the opportunity to pull away. However, Yang Na's movement technique was extremely strange. She moved her feet as if she had teleported. Before Jeff could pull away, Yang Na had already appeared behind him. Bang! She pulled the trigger again, and the arrow accurately hit Jeff's neck. At the same time, the audience once again realized Jeff's second weakness as a spatial mage. He had no melee combat ability. Normal mages had melee skills such as Resistance Ring of Fire and Frost Nova. However, spatial mages had none of those. If they couldn't pull away in time, they could only be beaten to the ground. As a kung fu expert, although Yang Na was an archer, her close combat ability was extremely valiant. Even the top-notch king of close combat, an assassin, was not her opponent. Not to mention a mage who had no combat power in close combat. Just like that, Yang Na's movements were constantly changing. Every time she shot an arrow, she would follow up step by step. She would never give Jeff the slightest chance to pull away from her and launch a counterattack. Before long, Jeff's body was covered with arrows. From afar, he looked like a porcupine. TSK, TSK, TSK. Others might not be able to tell, but Wang Yu's eyes were extremely sharp. Looking at Yang Na chasing after Jeff and stabbing arrows into the arena, Wang Yu couldn't help but shake her head and say, "Ayaya, this lady's hostility is really heavy." "Ah? What do you mean?" Hearing Wang Yu's words, the others were puzzled. It was a competition, after all. Wasn't that how it was? Just use your full strength to beat your opponent to death? Who cared about tactics? This had nothing to do with evil aura. Faced with everyone's doubts, Wang Yu pointed at Jeff and said, "Look carefully at where she is attacking." Direction? Hearing Wang Yu's words, the others all looked in the direction that Wang Yu was pointing at. When they clearly saw Yang Na's attack position, cold sweat flowed down their cheek. Even though Yang Na wasn't as overpowered as Wang Yu and evildoers run wild, her damage output wasn't low. It wouldn't take her more than a few hits to kill a fragile mage like Jeff. However, the girl's attacks completely avoided Jeff's vital parts, and every attack dealt minimal damage. He was clearly going to trample Jeff to death. Of course, Jeff reaped what he sowed. Yang Na was an unyielding girl, but she didn't have a big heart. Not only did Jeff force Yang Na to cut off one of his arms, he even used the teleportation door to reflect Yang Na's skills, almost allowing Yang Na to kill him. The grudge between the two was naturally formed. Jeff didn't have any complaints about being tortured to death by Yang Na. In the arena, Jeff had been pierced by dozens of arrows. The health bar above his head had only dropped by a third. Seeing this, not only the motley crew, but everyone else also realized what Yang Na was trying to do. Jeff, with his calm personality, couldn't help but panic when he saw Yang Na stubbornly refusing to let him go. Yang Na, on the other hand, was still expressionless. She meticulously followed up, fired, and so on. Every time she raised her hand, an arrow would appear on Jeff's body. 50 arrows. 80 arrows. Jeff's eyes were listless. He had already lost all thoughts of resisting. 91 arrows. 92 arrows. The audience started counting in unison. At this moment, everyone wanted to see how many arrows this archer could pierce into Jeff. 107 arrows. 108 arrows. Finally, when Yang Na had pierced all 108 arrows, the health bar above Jeff's head was completely emptied. He transformed into a white light and was teleported out of the arena. Wow! Almost at the same time, the audience applauded enthusiastically. A total of 108 arrows had finally pierced Jeff to death. The applause wasn't only for this shocking record, but also for the strong and despairing Jeff. What a pitiful child. He had suffered. After playing games for so long, this was the first time they felt that a low attack was more terrifying than an instant kill. After all, an instant kill was only a matter of one round. However, Yang Na's attack method was completely draining the opponent's spirit and willpower. Fortunately, the opponent was a top-notch expert like Jeff. His mental fortitude was extremely strong. If it was an ordinary person, they would definitely suffer from mental illness after this match. This was a real-life experience of being executed by 1,000 cuts. This was a life experience that ordinary people couldn't experience. You've worked hard, you've worked hard. Jeff was teleported out of the arena. Lock Bai and the others consoled him with pity. Jeff was on the verge of tears. He broke down and said, "Women? Scary. This is just an exception. There are also women who aren't scary." Jeff was also a man. Now that he was beaten to such a state by a girl, Lockby and the others felt their hearts ache. That's right. Our Missy isn't scary. An assassin beside Jeff came over and said, Missy? Hearing the assassin's words, Jeff broke down even more. Scary, this bunch of bastards. In the arena, Meng Shi, who was watching the live broadcast, clenched her fists tightly. She resisted the urge to open Jeff's gaming pod and drag him out to give him a good kick. As for the motley crew, when they saw Yang Na teleport back to the team, everyone behaved themselves like obedient children. In the past, everyone dared to joke around with Yang Na. Now they had truly witnessed this girl's fierceness. What was a true man of iron blood? The motley crew didn't even dare to boast that they were men in front of Yang Na. Cutting off one of her arms at the critical moment, then counterattacking and executing her opponent by 1,000 cut. Such an action could definitely be called ruthless. Not only was she ruthless to herself, she was even more ruthless to her enemies. Such a ruthless person could make others speechless just by standing there. What a joke. If they angered her, Jeff would definitely end up like them. Chapter 1897. At the end of the 2 matches, Motley Crowd had secured 2 points. The Sanctuary Battle Team was indeed an expert battle team. Although they had temporarily lost, the members of the team were still talking and laughing, as if they did not take the previous 2 losses seriously. This was because they had fought against the members of the Quan Zhen sect before, and they had also watched the matches of the Motley Crew. Hence, they were quite familiar with the strength of Wang Yu and Rampant Demon. Therefore, the Sanctuary Battle Team was already mentally prepared from the start. They did not expect to crush their opponents in the first match. Now that the first 2 matches were over, Motley Crowd was only left with Wang Yu and Evildoers Run Wild. The next match should be that fatty, Locke said as he glanced at Evildoers Run Wild. Machine Cannon, don't let us down. He turned around and said to an archer behind him, Machine Cannon, don't let us down. Understood. Machine Cannon made an okay gesture and appeared in the arena in a flash. On the other hand, Team Motley Bunch's representative was Pride. Although the Sanctuary Battle Team was a veteran battle team, the members in the team changed quickly. This guy named Machine Cannon was obviously a new face. He looked like he was only 18 or 19 years old. To place one's Pride was about the same age as Machine Cannon, but to place one's Pride had more fans than him. After all, Parting Pride had displayed impressive strength in the last match yesterday. He was one of the 3 iconic Grandmasters of Combat in the Ragtag team. To place one's Pride had such strong strength at such a young age and was so cute. The audience had a deep impression of him. Lu Huaqiang once said that if one was not frivolous, one would be called a youngster. A youngster who could reach the top of the world's professional league at this age must be very arrogant. Machine Cannon was naturally a guy with eyes on the top of his head. In his eyes, Motley Crowd was just like its name. Other than a few experts, the rest were trash. In the eyes of Machine Cannon, only the 2 great experts, Evildoers Run Wild and Wang Yu, could be his opponent. Even Yang Na Machine Cannon didn't think much of them. To place one's Pride's sudden appearance, Machine Cannon was very disdainful. To place one's Pride, in the eyes of ordinary people, might be an expert. However, top-notch experts were not ordinary people. Since the 9 provinces battle team could see that to place one's Pride's strength had greatly increased, of course, the Templar battle team could also see it. To place one's Pride's performance in the past, Machine Cannon looked down on him. Hey. Hello. Just as Machine Cannon was inwardly displeased, Gao suddenly greeted him with a smile. Although Machine Cannon was disdainful, he still raised his head subconsciously. Unexpectedly, to place one's Pride made a mocking face at the autocannon. F***CK. Youngsters were indeed hot-tempered. Machine Cannon already looked down on to place one's Pride. Seeing that to place one's Pride dared to provoke him, Machine Cannon's anger rushed to his head. To place one's pride gave him the middle finger. To place one's pride didn't get angry when he saw Machine Cannon's middle finger. On the contrary, his face revealed a harmless smile. Uncivilized words and actions. Yellow card warning. Machine Cannon was puzzled as to why to place one's pride had such an expression. Suddenly, a system notification rang in his ear. Due to the indecent behavior of a certain country's players during the spring competition, the International Professional League specially added a rule of civilized words and actions. Naturally, the system wouldn't tolerate Machine Cannon's indecent behavior. Rebirth had a lot of young players. Misleading images was not allowed. Pohaha, seeing the Templar battle team receiving a yellow card, the audience immediately roared with laughter. The motley crowd battle team below the stage were about to go crazy with laughter. As they laughed, they praised Wuji. "Old dog Wuji, you're really shameless. You actually gave to place one's pride such a bad idea. All's fair in war," Wuji said proudly. A true expert is able to skillfully use the rules. Awesome, awesome. Everyone gave Wuji a thumbs up. Oh my god. What's going on in that kid's head? Compared to the motley crowd battle team's joy, the Templar battle team wanted to vomit blood. Everyone covered their eyes as they couldn't bear to look at Machine Cannon on the stage. Damn, this kid's strength was unquestionable. It was just that no one had taught him how to deal with the various tricks on the stage. They knew that the motley crowd battle team was shameless, but they didn't expect them to be this shameless. After receiving a yellow card for no reason, the already enraged autocannon was stunned on the spot. 3 seconds later, he completely exploded and said angrily, "Sh*T. What is this stupid system trying to say? Motherf****. He even used a classic curse. It was clear that Machine Cannon was extremely angry. God, please forgive this silly kid. The Templar battle team were in tears. Brother, shut up if I give you a yellow card. Why are you even cursing the system? This kid with no competition experience can't afford to be hurt. Ha ha ha." Hearing Machine Cannon's angry words, the motley crowd battle team and the audience laughed even harder. As expected, the system didn't let them down. As soon as Machine Cannon finished speaking, the system's emotionless voice sounded. Sacred Mountain battle team's Machine Cannon has been rude and insulted the system's referee. Given a red card and forced to leave the stage. To place one's pride battle team's contestant is the winner. Following the system's notification, Machine Cannon was kicked off the stage with a dumbfounded look. To place one's pride won the 3rd round for the motley crowd battle team. Currently, the motley crowd battle team was leading 3-0. Moreover, the motley crowd battle team's 2 strongest players had yet to enter the stage. Squeak! As the 3rd round ended, the Templar battle team's side sounded a warning. At the same time, Lockby stood up and said, "We request for an intermission break." Esports was a sport that required a lot of energy and stamina. Therefore, an intermission break was necessary. In order to prevent unexpected breaks, apart from the fixed intermission time between the 3 matches, both teams were allowed 1 intermission break each time. Now that the Templar battle team had decided to take an intermission break, it was obvious that the motley crowd battle team had disrupted their rhythm. Thinking about it, the original plan for the 3rd round was for Machine Cannon to fight against Evildoer's Run Wild. As an archer, Machine Cannon was the perfect counter to a full-strength fighter. However, who knew that the motley crowd battle team would be so wild? In the 3rd round, they used such a despicable move and directly messed up the Templar battle team's plan. During the intermission break, everyone exited the gaming pods. At this time, the changing room door was completely blocked by reporters. Seeing that the motley crowd battle team was walking towards them, the reporters rushed forward and surrounded to place one's pride. "Don't you feel ashamed for using such a trick to win?" "Of course not." To place one's pride laughed and said, "You need to use your brain in a competition. I'm obviously much smarter than him." Chapter 1898. The Ragtag team winning 3 matches in a row was within the expectations of the Templar team. However, they only sent out 1 expert after 3 matches. This was beyond the expectations of the Templar team. To place one's pride's victory in the 3rd match disrupted the Templar team's rhythm. At this moment, in the Templar team's resting room, everyone was frowning with a serious look on their faces. "We can't go on like this." Lockby furrowed his brows. "The opponent's 2 strongest players haven't even gone up, and we've already lost 3 matches. Are we going to be completely wiped out in the first match?" As warriors, their innate qualities were far superior to ordinary people. Even in the eyes of top players like Lockby, the strength of Wang Yu and evildoers run wild was quite terrifying. According to Lockby's original plan, they would at most lose 3 matches in the first match. After the first match, they would at most be at a disadvantage of 1 point. In the second match, even if they were unlucky enough to draw Wang Yu in the first match, the score difference would at most be 11 points. Although the total score for the last match was 20 points, the difference was 11 points. Even if the first 2 matches weren't satisfactory, as long as they could win the last match, even if there was only 1 person left, they could still win. However, who knew that Wang Yu and evildoers run wild, the 2 top players, hadn't even appeared in the match, but they had already lost 3-0. No matter how calm Lockby was, he couldn't sit still anymore. After all, Lockby had fought with Wang Yu before. Lockby didn't dare to jump to conclusions about the strength of evildoers run wild, but he knew that Wang Yu's level was definitely higher than anyone in his team. A match between top teams naturally had to be won. At this moment, the first match had turned out this way. Even the most conservative calculations didn't meet expectations. It was reasonable for Lockby to be nervous. "Let me go for the 4th match." Just as Lockby was feeling worried, a bearded man beside him suddenly volunteered to take up the task. The bearded man was tall and sturdy. His eyes were bright and piercing, and his muscular body didn't look like a gamer. Instead, he looked like a boxer. "Boss!" Lockby turned around and looked at the bearded man. He was surprised. "Are you going to fight so early?" If anyone from the Motley Bunch battle team was here, they would be shocked to hear Lockby address the bearded man. Whether it was his personal strength or his ability to command, Lockby was undoubtedly a top-notch expert. Even Wuji was full of praise for Lockby's ability to command the battlefield. At this time, no matter what team he was placed in, he should be at the level of a leader. However, Lockby called this bearded man boss, and he did it so naturally. It was obvious that this bearded man was not an ordinary person. The bearded man nodded and said, "To be honest, I also want to meet the expert you often mention. But isn't it too early for you to go up now?" Lockby said awkwardly, "I wanted you to restrain Iron Ox from behind. I can't wait." Big Beard waved his hand and said, "We've already lost 3 rounds. We can't lose the next 2 rounds no matter what. You should understand this logic." "I understand." Locke nodded. In the professional arena, it was very shameful to be shaved bald, especially in the first round. If they lost the second round, at least there was an explanation. After all, the competition was random, and luck was an uncontrollable factor. Being shaved bald was understandable. The first round was a competition where players were chosen independently. It was a test of the number and quality of experts in each team. If they lost the first round 5-0, it clearly meant that the losing side's skill level was extremely low. Whether it was the number or quality of experts, they were inferior to the other side. This was intolerable for a top-notch team. For a team to reach this level, they were already world-famous. Reputation was naturally extremely important. At the very least, they couldn't lose the first round. Winning 1 point would be considered saving some face for themselves. Lockby clearly respected Big Beard a lot. Since Big Beard had said so, Lockby didn't dare to resist. "All right. Then let boss go up next, Lockby said. But the opponent is not an ordinary person. Even if it's boss, you have to be careful. I know. Big Beard nodded in understanding. In the resting room of the motley crowd, this group of scum seemed to be reminiscing about to place one's pride's victory in the last round. Everyone was talking and laughing. To place one's pride was even more arrogant. He said, "The highest realm of martial arts is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Have you bunch of old things learned anything yet?" Awesome, awesome, awesome. Everyone gave him a thumbs up. It's not too much to call me the #1 expert in Chuanjian, right? To place one's pride said again. To place one's pride had just finished speaking when a question mark popped up on Wang Yu's head. Restrain yourself, restrain yourself. Hearing to place one's pride's words, everyone looked at Wang Yu and quickly said, "That's too much. Little chick, don't get cocky just because you have some achievement." Haha. To place one's pride saw Wang Yu looking at him expressionlessly. He hurriedly laughed and said, "Of course, I'm still a little lacking compared to Uncle Nyo." Knock, knock, knock. Just as the few of them were enthusiastically praising each other, there was a sudden knock on the door outside the resting room. Ling Long Dream casually opened the door, only to see Meng Shi walking in with a serious expression. Huh. Seeing who it was, the motley crowd was a little surprised. Wuji even joked, "You traitor of Chuanjian, what are you doing here? Spying on the military?" What kind of temper did Meng Shi have? Naturally, she wouldn't put Wuji's words to heart. She stared coldly at Wuji, then scanned her surroundings. Finally, she said solemnly, "You guys better be careful in the next match." The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener did. In fact, Meng Shi was really reminding the Chuanjian crowd out of goodwill. However, these words, combined with Meng Shi's current identity as the leader, were a little harsh. Oh! The moment Meng Shi said this, the faces of the motley crowd darkened. Wuji was all smiles as he said, "Big sis, that's not very kind of you. Although I'm very familiar with you, you can't just come knocking on my door and provoke me. Do you think I'm in the mood to bother with you?" Meng Shi was still expressionless as she said, "I'm just reminding you that the expert from the Templar battle team in the next round isn't simple." Not simple? At the side, Mingdu pointed at Wang Yu and Evildoers Run Wild and said, "These two lords, which one is simple?" In any case, I've already reminded you guys, it's up to you whether you want to listen or not. Meng Shi had never been one to speak much nonsense. Seeing that the motley crowd looked rather hostile, she couldn't be bothered to explain. After throwing out that sentence, she slammed the door and left, leaving behind the motley crowd with confused expressions. Chapter 1899. F***CK. There's something wrong with this girl's head. Seeing Meng Shi leave as she pleased, Mingdu roared, "If she wasn't a girl, and Dao Shue's girlfriend at that, I would have killed her already." "Stop bullshitting." The others curled their lips. "Do you know what her background is? If you dare to make a move, our team will probably lose a player tomorrow." "Is it that bad?" Wang Yu asked Wuji in surprise. "That's right." Wuji shrugged, "This is overseas. Do you think it's the same as in China? Here, the underworld is a legal profession. Just find a few hooligans and they'll be able to silence Mingdu." F***CK. Mingdo's body trembled, and he hurriedly said, "I was just bragging, do you understand? What a piece of trash." Everyone looked at him with disdain. The 10-minute intermission ended quickly. Both teams returned to the arena, and the fourth round continued. Competition was like playing cards, the trump card was always left to the back. For the Ragtag Bunch Battle Team's fourth match, it was naturally Rampage, while for the Templar Battle Team, it was a Holy Paladin in silvery white armor. Paladin? Seeing Templar's player, the audience was a little confused. Paladin was a famous all-rounder support class, but this class made people feel very conflicted. If you said he was weak, he could fight, resist, and heal. It could be said that he was strong, but compared to the other professional professions, he was still lacking in maturity. He could use a greatsword to deal damage, but he wasn't as good as a weapon warrior. He could use a shield but wasn't good at it, and he couldn't heal as well as a priest. Therefore, paladins had an awkward position in normal teams. If the tank died, the paladin would replace him. If the damage dealer died, the paladin would replace him. If the healer died, the paladin would replace him. Because of this, paladins were also known as the Eternal Second. Although they looked very well-rounded, they couldn't be the main force, and could only be a substitute. It was even worse in PvP. Because paladins could use holy light to transform various weapons, and their skills required the buff of talismans, it was very complicated to control. The amount of energy required to train a single paladin profession was equivalent to training several professions at the same time. Whether or not they could train well was another matter altogether. If it wasn't practiced well, a holy knight would be a pile of sloppy trash. If it was practiced well, it would be an all-round divine profession. In the professional arena, of course, you had to ensure an absolute win rate. This was a class that was difficult to train, slow to master, and the investment and rewards were not proportional. Naturally, not many people would specifically train this class. As a result, the paladin class rarely appeared in the professional arena. The sudden appearance of such a class in the S-rank Pro League was quite surprising. But everyone understood. Even grandmasters of combat could enter the professional arena. Paladins were still slightly stronger than grandmasters of combat. After the players from both sides went on stage, it was customary to introduce the players. Motley Crowd's player is called Evildoers Run Wild. His profession is a grandmaster of combat. The Templar Battle Team's player is called Templar Apostle. His class is Holy Knight. Evildoers Run Wild had an outstanding record in a few competitions, and he was very unique. Everyone had a rather deep impression of him. However, when it came to the introduction of Evildoers Run Wild's opponent, the audience suddenly became silent. Holy Apostle? Could it be that Holy Apostle? F***CK. I thought that guy didn't come. Not only the audience, but even the experts of the various teams widened their eyes when they heard the words Holy Apostle. According to the rules, every team had a minimum of 12 members, but only 10 would go on stage. Other than the team leader, the rest were all substitute. Motley Crowd's members were sparse. It was already not easy to gather 12 people. Including the logistics members, there were not more than 20 people. In a competition of this level, it was really shabby. For a top-level team like 9 states, the starting point was a 20-man team. As a veteran team, Templar Battle Team had as many as 2 teams participating in this competition, and there were 7 or 8 substitute. In the previous few matches, the Templar Apostle had been hidden among the substitutes and was not part of the main lineup. That was why no one had noticed him during the introductions. However, who would have thought that the Templar Battle Team, who had lost 3 matches in a row, would actually swap him out during the intermission? It's him. Looks like Old Devil is not going to be easy this time. Looking at the Holy Apostle on the stage, Wuji couldn't help but feel nervous. Is this guy very strong? Wang Yu asked, puzzled. Although Evildoers Run Wild's strength was not as good as Wang Yu's, Evildoers Run Wild was still Wang Yu's younger brother, so Wang Yu still had some understanding of his strength. Among the younger generation, Evildoers Run Wild was considered to be a rare opponent. Other than Wang Yu himself, Evildoers Run Wild had rarely seen anyone who was a match for Evildoers Run Wild. However, from what Wuji said, this Holy Apostle seemed to be stronger than Evildoers Run Wild. It's no longer enough to describe him as strong. In response to Wang Yu's question, Wuji frowned and said, "This guy can only be described as terrifying." How terrifying! It's almost equivalent to you in the European server. Wuji confidently said. Moreover, he is also a master of the Templar Battle Team. The Templar Battle Team is named after his ID. Although the Templar Battle Team has wins and losses, this Templar Apostle has never lost a single battle. Even in a group battle, it would take at least 3 experts to suppress him. Even the Pantheon Temple would have a headache if they met him. Is that so? Wang Yu heard this, and could not help but look at the Holy Apostle in surprise. Group battle was basically a 10v10 battle. More than 3 masters would join forces to suppress one person. This was almost equivalent to the strength of an ordinary person. From this, it could be seen that this Holy Apostle was very strong. For an ordinary person to be able to play the game to this extent, his gaming talent was obvious. Indeed, the world was big and full of strange things. He did not expect to meet such a strange person in a game. Just when everyone was shocked by the sudden appearance of the Holy Apostle, the competition on the stage had already begun. Although the Holy Apostle was a veteran master, Evildoers Run Wild was a local server businessman. His customer base were all local players. 4 players like Chuanjin who had some fame in the local server, Evildoers Run Wild could be familiar with them. As for foreign masters, he knew nothing about them. Naturally, he would not recognize the Holy Apostle. After the competition began, Evildoers Run Wild swaggered over as usual. Facing the approaching Evildoers Run Wild, the Holy Apostle's expression was very calm. He took out a talisman and stuck it on his scepter. The scepter instantly turned into a shining golden totem. Immediately after, the Holy Apostle stuck the totem into the ground. Swoosh! A golden light spread from the totem. At the same time, the Holy Apostle's fist emitted a dazzling blue light. Chapter 1900. Online Games. I am Martial Arts Scholar. Happy New Year. Currently typing, please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1901. Yea! Evildoers Run Wild was stunned to see the Holy Church Apostle suddenly transform into such a strange appearance. The members of 9 States team exclaimed at the same time, "Is this the legendary Blue Fist Saint Apostle?" Blue Fist Saint Apostle was a hidden branch of paladins. The paladins of this branch could transform their weapons into totems to buff themselves with holy power. Then, they could fight against their enemies with their bare fists. As a top-class player, they were naturally well-informed. 5 Lakes 4 Seas and the others had long heard of the Holy Church Apostle changing into such a strange class, but today was the first time they saw it. It couldn't be helped. The training of pro players was very private. Even the players of the same guild wouldn't have too much contact with them. It was already good enough that they knew of such a strange class. As for the others, they had never heard of the Holy Church Apostle transforming into such a strange appearance. Evildoers Run Wild was also a bold person. Although he didn't know what the other party was doing, he was fearless because he was strong. He threw a punch at the Holy Church Apostle's face. Evildoers Run Wild was a grandmaster of combat. His punches were as big as sandbags, and one punch was enough to split mountains. One could imagine the outcome of being punched by him. Hee. However, in the face of Evildoers Run Wild's attack, the Holy Church Apostle only smiled slightly. He bent his fists in front of his chest and tilted his body slightly. Swoosh! The Holy Church's Apostle seemed to have teleported, leaving behind an afterimage as he moved backward. Swing! Blue Fist Saint Apostle's unique skill allows the user to quickly move in a short distance. Although swing was an evasive skill, it didn't consume any energy and had a short cooldown. It was the Blue Fist Saint Apostle's core PvP skill. Aya! The evildoer Heng Xing's punch missed its target. He staggered and almost fell. At the same time, the Holy Church Apostle lowered his head and bent his back, leaning forward. Swoosh! Just like before, the Templar Apostle once again moved forward, leaving afterimages in his wake. He swooped down to the side of Evildoers Run Wild, lowered his right fist, and smashed it towards Evildoer's Run Wild's stomach. Of course, Evildoer's Run Wild was no pushover either. Although Evildoer's Run Wild was currently in a stun state, Evildoer's Run Wild was in manual mode. In independent mode, players could only attack for a short period of time. They could also perform many actions as they pleased. As a martial arts expert, Evildoer's Run Wild was certainly not as strong as Wang Yu, but parrying was also an instinct. Seeing the Templar Apostle's fist flying towards his stomach, Evildoer's Run Wild's right hand pressed downwards, perfectly hitting the Templar Apostle's fist. Evildoer's Run Wild had put all his attribute points into strength, so his judgment was needless to say. Out of all the classes, the Templar Apostle had the highest judgment. Although his attribute points weren't as extreme as Evildoer's Run Wild's, his judgment wasn't low either. Pah! The two fists and palms collided. As if they had been electrocuted, both of them took 2 steps back. What kind of strength is this? After steadying himself, the Templar Apostle looked at the back of his hand, which had turned red from the slap, his heart filled with horror. This diving belly punch was a common starting move used by the Templar Apostle. Skills that could be used as a starting move were basically crowd control skills. The diving belly punch was no exception. Not only could this skill freeze the target for a long time, but it also had a certain chance to stun the target. Its crowd control effect was quite strong. However, Evildoer's Run Wild had neutralized this skill with just a casual slap. It was truly inconceivable. A casual slap. If Evildoer's Run Wild knew the Templar Apostle's evaluation of his blocking move just now, Evildoer's Run Wild would probably die of anger. This move was called Breeze Brushing Willow. It was a rather exquisite technique that borrowed strength to fight. If one practiced it to a high level, it was said that one could use 4 ounces to move 1,000 pounds. 4 ounces to move 1,000 pounds was definitely an exaggeration, but it was still possible to use 100 pounds to move 1,000 pounds. Although Evildoer's Run Wild skills weren't that good, this kid had monstrous strength. He had used this kind of skillful technique to block the Templar Apostle's attack. From this, it could be seen how fierce the Templar Apostle's punch was. However, what surprised Evildoer's Run Wild the most wasn't the Templar Apostle's attack power, but the kid's movement speed. The attribute points in Rebirth were fixed. The attribute points added for every level up were also the same. If one wanted to have strong attack power, they had to sacrifice other attributes, and movement speed was obviously one of them. This was something that Evildoer's Run Wild deeply understood. The current Evildoer's Run Wild's attack power and priority were shockingly high, but his movement speed was relatively pitiful. The Paladin was a class that didn't have much growth in speed. Moreover, he was covered in heavy armor. At first glance, he looked like a clumsy tank. Even if he added agility, his speed wouldn't be comparable to a Grandmaster of Combat. However, not only did the Templar Apostle have high HP and defense, his priority and attack power were shocking, and his movement speed was terrifying. He could actually dodge Evildoer's Run Wild's attacks so easily. This was a little puzzling. Both of them were bare-handed classes, but this Paladin was already so strong. What was the point of having a Grandmaster of Combat? Thinking of this, the two of them looked at each other and simultaneously revealed a look of appreciation. It seems that I have underestimated you. Flash punch. The Templar Apostle muttered to himself. Immediately after, he swung his right fist at Evildoer's Run Wild. Suddenly, a shadow of a fist flew in front of Evildoer's Run Wild. Just now, he was almost at a disadvantage. At this moment, Evildoer's Run Wild didn't dare to be careless against the opponent in front of him. Seeing the shadow of the fist flying towards him, Evildoer's Run Wild immediately raised his fist to block. Diving punch. At the same time when Evildoer's Run Wild blocked the attack, the Templar Apostle bent his waist again and dove in front of Evildoer's Run Wild. His right fist directly punched towards Evildoer's Run Wild. Feeling the attack coming from behind, Evildoers Run Wild raised his other hand and used Burst Punch to smash towards the Templar Apostle's punch. Bang! 2 rays of light, one gold and one blue, collided and disappeared without a trace. Diving Punch. After the Templar Apostle's attack was blocked, he bent his knees and suddenly lowered his body. He retracted his right hand and smashed it upwards towards Evildoers Run Wild's chin. It was true that Evildoers Run Wild put all his points into strength, but his skills weren't weak either. He tilted his head back and the Templar Apostle's attack brushed past his face. The Templar Apostle's fist technique walked the path of big and bold move. It didn't matter if the punch missed, but the Templar Apostle also revealed an opening. Evildoers Run Wild stretched both of his hands forward. His left hand grabbed the Templar Apostle's wrist and his right hand supported the Templar Apostle's armpit. At the same time, with his waist as the pivot point, he suddenly turned around and threw the Templar Apostle away. Chapter 1902. After throwing away the Templar Apostle, the evildoer Heng Xing didn't stop moving forward. He stretched out his right fist and threw a heavy punch at his opponent. Prediction was the basic evaluation criteria for a master. A top-notch master could observe his opponent's movements through a short exchange of blows and make accurate judgments. Although the Saint Apostle was still in midair, judging from the trajectory of the Saint Apostle's flight, Evildoers Run Wild's punch would definitely land on the Saint Apostle's face. Grandmasters of Combat were a class that was born for combo attack. Other classes also had unlimited combo attacks, but due to the long cooldown time of the skills, the tolerance for mistakes was extremely low. On the other hand, the short cooldown time of a Grandmaster of Combat allowed this class to perform all kinds of fancy combo attack. If Evildoers Run Wild's punch landed, the Saint Apostle would basically be dead. However, the Saint Apostle's strength was unparalleled since he was rated as the Iron Ox of the European server by Wuji. Ha! Seeing the monster Heng Xing's fist flying over, the Saint Hall Apostle let out a roar in midair, raised his hand and smashed the ground. Boom! With a loud bang, the Saint Apostle was forced to land on the ground. His fist hit the ground and created a crack. At the same time, a ray of blue light spread out from the Saint Apostle. Holy Fist Hammer. As a Grandmaster of Combat among the Paladins, all of the skills of the Blue Fist Holy Apostle were mainly crowd control skills. Holy Fist Hammer was a typical crowd control skill. The shock wave that spread out could knock all the targets that were hit into the air. Evildoers Run Wild did not know the attributes of this skill. However, after playing the game for so long, Evildoers Run Wild understood the principle of dodging anything that came out of the ground. Therefore, he jumped backward and jumped out of the range of the shockwave of Holy Fist Hammer. Unexpectedly, the Apostle seemed to have known that Evildoers Run Wild would dodge like this. Just as Evildoers Run Wild jumped back, the Apostle's body swayed and once again dove towards Evildoers Run Wild's feet, punching the ground again. Shattering Hammer. The enhanced version of Holy Fist Hammer strike could be used in conjunction with swing. Its power was even greater than Holy Fist Hammer strike. Evildoers Run Wild didn't know any Qigong. After jumping in midair, Evildoers Run Wild's mobility was greatly reduced. At this moment, the Holy Church Apostle had already rushed under Evildoers Run Wild's body. Naturally, Evildoers Run Wild couldn't dodge. Boom! The Apostle of the Holy Church slammed his fist into the ground. Evildoers Run Wild took the full brunt of the punch and was sent floating in the air. Levitating. The initiative on the stage was immediately transferred from the hands of Evildoers Run Wild to the Holy Church Apostle. After the target was levitated, the Apostle bent his waist like a boxer. His fists were placed in front of his chest, and a jab landed on Evildoers Run Wild's body. Evildoers Run Wild, who was still in midair, was hit until his body stiffened. Following that, the Apostle followed up with a beautiful combination of punches. Soaring Fist, second levitating. Straight fist, levitating. Swing fist, heavy force. With the help of swing, the apostle's body became extremely agile. Every punch could be accurately connected, and every punch was perfectly aimed at the parts of evildoers run wild that were most difficult to defend against. Although evildoers run wild's equipment was good, it couldn't withstand the attacks of a top-tier expert like the Holy Church Apostle. The health bar above evildoers run wild's head was rapidly decreasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a set of holy combination punches, evildoers run wild's health bar had dropped to around 30%. It's over. Seeing that the evildoer was covered in red blood, the Templar Apostle let out a loud roar. A dazzling light burst forth from his right fist. The audience could even see the holy light gathering on the Templar Apostle's fist. In an instant, the violent holy light gathered on the Apostle's fist into a huge ball of light. The Apostle swung his right fist forward and blasted it at evildoers run wild. Awakening, obliterating divine strike. A line of Chinese characters appeared above the Apostle's head. Other than the special effects, this seemingly ordinary skill was the Holy Church Apostle's awakening skill. Obliterating divine strike, as the name suggested, was an attack that could obliterate even gods. Its attack power was so strong that it was definitely the strongest skill that the Holy Church Apostle could use. If this punch hit its target, evildoers run wild would definitely not have the slightest chance of survival. Seeing this scene, the audience's hearts were absolutely shocked to the extreme. Everyone had witnessed the strength of evildoers run wild. Although he didn't appear on stage many times, his achievements were extremely outstanding. Even top-tier experts could only last 3 moves against evildoers run wild. Coupled with his rustic attire, the audience jokingly called him the Farmer's 3 Punches. Although this nickname was not pleasant to hear, it indirectly reflected the status of evildoers run wild in the hearts of the audience. However, this strangely dressed paladin in front of them did not even use a weapon. He was able to beat up such a ruthless person like a sandbag with his bare hands. This was simply unbelievable. This year's S-rank professional league's standard was 2F** king high. Even Wuji and the others could not help but exclaim, as expected of the strongest person in the European server, "This son of AB*TCH is really strong. I can't believe that even Old Devil is no match for him. He's the boss after all. He can actually completely suppress this demon." In the Templar battle team, Locke and the others clenched their fists when they saw that the Holy Church Apostle had used his final killing move. The match is not over yet. Just when everyone thought that evildoers run wild was going to be killed by the Holy Church Apostle's final attack, Wang Yu's face revealed a confident smile. Bang! To the astonishment of the audience, the Holy Church Apostle's fist landed on evildoers run wild's body. He won. Seeing that the Holy Church Apostle had hit his target, the Templar battle team cheered excitedly. Oh, no! However, at this moment, the Holy Church Apostle's face revealed an expression of disbelief. Crash! A clear sound was heard. Immediately after, evildoers run wild was hit by the annihilation divine strike and turned into pieces on the ground. Doppelganger! It was a doppelganger! Seeing this scene, everyone almost shouted at the same time. Patter! At this time, the Holy Church Apostle heard the sound of someone landing on the ground behind him. He quickly turned around and saw that evildoers run wild had landed firmly behind him. You're really strong. Evildoers run wild wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and gave the Holy Church Apostle a thumbs up in amazement. He then said with a serious expression, "But ultimately, you're just a gamer." Aren't you a gamer? The Holy Church Apostle seemed to understand Mandarin. After hearing evildoers run wild's words, he could not help but raise his eyebrows and ask, "No, we're not the same." Evildoers run wild solemnly rolled up his sleeves. His expression and actions were exactly the same as Wang Yu's. While rolling up his sleeves, Evildoers Run Wild said calmly, "I've already seen through your punching style." Mobile version of the fastest updated website, M. Chapter 1903. Fist Style. Hearing Evildoers Run Wild's words, the apostle was dumbfounded. It couldn't be helped. Gamers and fighters were people from two different worlds. Although everyone was in the same virtual world, their understanding of this world was fundamentally different. As a martial artist, whether it was Wang Yu, the monstrous genius Heng Xing, or Yang Na, when they fought, they would always look at their opponent's fist patterns, and from there, find their flaws and kill them. In layman's terms, it was to look at the essence through the appearance. As for gaming experts like the apostle, they would observe the target's skill range, calculate the cooldown time of the target's skill, and then determine the opponent's weakness and effectively deal damage. Although both methods seemed to be able to annihilate the opponent, the second method could only be considered as a counter to the opponent's move. If Evildoers Run Wild said that he had seen through his skills or routines, the apostle would definitely understand. But what the hell was this fist style? He couldn't understand it at all. Playing tricks. Although he didn't understand the meaning behind Evildoers Run Wild's words, he was quite displeased with Evildoers Run Wild's current attitude. "You were beaten to this state by me, why are you still pretending?" The apostle glanced at Evildoers Run Wild in disdain, his body swayed, and a straight dive punch was thrown at him. Humph humph. Seeing this, Evildoers Run Wild didn't dodge. He simply waved his left hand. Pack! Just when the apostle was about to punch Evildoers Run Wild, Evildoers Run Wild arrived first, and slapped the apostle's fist. The straight dive punch was not as powerful as the belly punch. In front of a grandmaster of combat like Evildoers Run Wild, it was powerless. With just one slap, Evildoers Run Wild slapped the apostle's fist to the side. The apostle's body swayed slightly from the slap. An opening! At this moment, Evildoers Run Wild steadied himself and stood up from the ground. His right fist suddenly extended forward and smashed towards the Holy Church apostle's chest. Although the Templar apostles had an evasive skill like swing, they were currently in a stun state, so it was already too late for them to dodge. They could only take this heavy punch from Evildoers Run Wild head-on. Boom! The all-out attack of a Grandmaster of Combat was not just for show. After being hit by Evildoers Run Wild's punch, the Templar apostle was blasted 5 to 6 meters away. He took another 4 to 5 steps back before he could regain his balance. Evildoers Run Wild's punch had also reduced a third of the HP bar above its head. One had to know that the Templar apostle was a paladin class. Not only was his heavy armor extremely high defense, but he also had a holy totem under his feet, which increased his attack and defense by nearly one-fold. With such high defense, he was still hit by a punch. The terrifying attack power of Evildoers Run Wild really shocked the Templar apostle. If this was a fight between any other class, this punch would have been enough to decide the outcome of the fight. When the audience saw that Evildoers Run Wild had hit the target with one punch, they all shouted in unison, "One punch!" The Templar apostle was quite confident in his own strength. He had only been hit by one punch, so naturally, he would not think that he was weaker than his opponent. After missing his attack, the Templar apostle used swing again and instantly appeared in front of Evildoers Run Wild. He raised his fist and smashed it towards Evildoers Run Wild's face. However, Evildoers Run Wild still did not dodge or block. He only swung his right fist horizontally to the right, towards the air on his right. Just when everyone was wondering why Evildoers Run Wild would attack the air, the Templar apostle suddenly appeared on the right side of Evildoers Run Wild and accurately used his face to catch Evildoers Run Wild's fist. Not bad. In the eyes of the audience, the Templar apostle who suddenly appeared seemed to have taken the initiative to catch Evildoers Run Wild's fist with his face. Boom! There was another muffled sound. Evildoers Run Wild's fist landed heavily on the Templar Apostle's nose. At this time, the Templar Apostle did not even have time to react to what had happened. The Templar Apostle's diving punch was just a feint. His real intention was actually to hit Evildoers Run Wild with his fist. This kind of feint technique was very advanced. Who knew that Evildoers Run Wild did not even look at his feint and accurately predicted his position? Such a strange prediction made the Templar Apostle doubt his life. Little did he know that this was what Evildoers Run Wild meant when he said that he could see through the Templar Apostle's punches. Not only did he see through the Templar Apostle's skills and attacking methods, but he also saw through the Templar Apostle's mentality when he attacked. This was the difference between seeing through the appearance of the opponent and countering the opponent's attack as it came. This was also the basic reason why martial artists were obviously much stronger than ordinary people when they had the same attribute. The Templar Apostle was already caught off guard and the punch was very powerful. The Templar Apostle was sent flying backward by this heavy punch. 2 punches! In the audience seats, the audience once again shouted in unison. After sending the Saint Apostle flying, Hung Xing quickly caught up with him. He raised his leg, which was shining with a bright light, and kicked towards the Saint Apostle. Flash chain kick. Everyone knew that flash chain kick was one of the strongest skills of a grandmaster of combat. When it was used by Evildoers Run Wild, who was at full strength, the destructive force seemed to be able to tear through the air. The strong impact caused the air to distort. The Templar Apostle, who had taken 2 punches from Evildoers Run Wild, only had a little more than a third of his health left. If he was hit by this kick again, he would definitely die. In the blink of an eye, the Templar Apostle hurriedly used quick recover to land on the ground. He rolled backward and stood up with his arms crossed in front of his body. Following that, an intense holy light was emitted from the Templar Apostle's body. Boom! Following a deafening bang, the holy light from Evildoers Run Wild's feet collided with the holy light from the Templar Apostle's body. The entire arena was flooded by these 2 intense lights. Everyone in the audience could not open their eyes because of the intense light. Huh! Only Wang Yu could not help but raise his eyebrows. He had a look of disbelief on his face. 3 punches! At the same time, the audience closed their eyes and shouted the 3rd punch. However, when the light dissipated, everyone's eyes widened in disbelief. The scene that everyone expected did not happen. The Templar Apostle, who was supposed to be kicked to death by Evildoers Run Wild, did not die. However, the health bar on his head was only left with a single digit. As for the expected winner, Evildoers Run Wild, he had been transported to the motley team below the arena. This is impossible. Seeing this scene, the audience cried out in dissatisfaction. With that kick just now, Evildoers Run Wild could have kicked his opponent to death. Why was the one who died instead of Evildoers Run Wild? Conspiracy. There must be a conspiracy. Of course, the system also knew that the audience would definitely be dissatisfied with this result. Therefore, it was very sensible to start a replay of the scene. Chapter 1904. When the video was played in slow motion, the special effects of Evildoers Run Wild and the Apostle's skills were largely stripped away. The scene of the 2 fighting was clearly displayed in front of the audience. When Evildoers Run Wild kicked the Apostle crossed his arms in front of his chest, blocking Evildoers Run Wild's blink chain kick. Just as the blink chain kick dealt damage, the Apostle suddenly rushed forward and punched Evildoers Run Wild's body. Both of them had the same HP numbers floating above their heads at the same time. What the F***ck is going on? Although they clearly saw the scene just now, they still couldn't understand how the Apostles could still launch a counterattack after being hit. Logically speaking, they should have been kicked to death or sent flying. It's counter-block. Just when the audience was confused, the commentator shouted excitedly. That's right. It was counter-block. It was also known as block, a skill that allowed the user to take a defensive stance and launch a counterattack the moment the opponent focused on them. Although this skill was extremely rare, as a top-tier player, it wasn't strange for an apostle to have such a skill. The apostle's skill was called Holy Counterattack. After activating the skill, he would enter a state of prayer. He could block 50% to 100% of the damage from a frontal attack and return all of it to the target that attacked him. The longer the prayer time, the higher the damage of the counter block. The prayer time was 2 seconds. In that kind of situation, the apostle naturally didn't have 2 seconds to pray, so the blocking effect of Holy Counterattack was only at the lowest 50%. At this moment, both evildoers Run Wild and the apostle's HP were around 30%. However, the difference was that evildoers Run Wild was a true fighter, a fragile class. The apostle, on the other hand, was a thick-skinned paladin. Under the buff of the totem, the apostle's defense and HP were greatly increased. Although he took half of the damage from evildoers Run Wild's kick, he luckily didn't die. Evildoers Run Wild wasn't so lucky. He took half of the damage from his blink chain kick and turned into a white light on the spot. To sum it up in one sentence, I kill myself. How shameless! After figuring out what exactly was going on, the audience felt that it was a pity for the demon's rampage, but they also started cursing the Holy Church's apostles. Using such a shameless technique to win was truly a dishonorable victory. Of course, the audience's thinking was actually very subjective. The Templar apostle didn't cheat or cheat. He only used one of his profession's skills to block the opponent's attack. Objectively speaking, the victory was quite positive. What else? Was it right to take a kick and not retaliate? What a joke. In a duel between experts in the arena, a single move could determine the victor. Everyone had invested so much time and money into planning their skills and equipment. In such a situation, they would definitely do their best to win the match. Just standing there and taking a beating was completely unrealistic. What a pity! Seeing that evildoers Run Wild had lost the match, Mingdu said indignantly, "That guy's skill is really shameless." It seemed that Mingdu still had a bit of competitive spirit. He only felt that his opponent's skills were shameless, but he didn't say that his opponent's actions were shameless. Otherwise, with the performance of this motley crew of scum, they could almost collectively commit suicide to atone for their sins. No. Unexpectedly, evildoers Run Wild said very calmly, "It's not a pity to lose." How is it not a pity? If that kid didn't block and counterattack, you would have won. Mingdu clenched his fists. Skills are only a part of it. Hengxing waved his hand and said, "In that kind of situation, even if he had this skill, he would have already won. This saint apostle is really powerful." Hengxing shook his head and said, "In that kind of situation, even if he had this skill, he would have already won." This. Hearing evildoers Run Wild say this, Mingdu was immediately stunned. Indeed, just now, evildoers Run Wild's attacks could be said to be continuous like moving clouds and flowing water. The connection between skills also didn't have the slightest flaw, especially that last kick. Everyone present, including the top experts of the various teams, absolutely couldn't guarantee that they could successfully block that kick, except for a non-human like Wang Yu. Yet, the apostle had managed to block it in one go. Whether it was his reaction speed, mechanics, or mental strength, he was clearly not inferior to evildoers Run Wild. Between martial artists, it wasn't just about winning or losing. After a match, every move was worth carefully pondering. Ignoring everything else, just that block from the apostle was enough to convince evildoers Run Wild of his loss. It must be known that evildoers Run Wild had practiced martial arts since he was young, which was why he had such a strong overall quality. The apostle was just a player, but to have such a strong overall quality, it could be seen how high his talent was. He was probably only slightly lower than a peerless genius like Wang Yu. Evildoers Run Wild was a person who respected the strong. The result of this match, Evildoers Run Wild naturally had nothing to say. Not only that, Evildoers Run Wild's indifferent attitude towards winning and losing, that kind of calmness that saw through the nature of things, made this petty businessman's face have an additional trace of the bearing of a grandmaster. Even Yang Na couldn't help but say, "I didn't expect you to be so gentlemanly when you're not fooling around." "Not bad." Wang Yu also nodded, gratified. "You have this kind of thinking, it shows that you've grown up." "Not bad, not bad." Evildoers Run Wild heard this and said shamelessly, "Actually, I've always been this kind of person. It's just that you guys are blind." Hearing Evildoers Run Wild say this, Wang Yu and Yang Na were instantly angry. This shameless guy really couldn't take a compliment. Just as Wang Yu and the others were lamenting, the apostle who won the match was also transported back to his team. At this time, the apostle was still fearful of Evildoers Run Wild's performance just now. The first thing he said when he returned to the team was, "That Grandmaster of Combat is really weird." Weird? Lok Bai was confused. "Can I understand it as very strong?" "Not really," the apostle explained, "being strong is only part of it. The key is that I feel like my whole body has been seen through by him. Whether it is skills or fighting style, he seems to have no reservations in his eyes. This time, I only took advantage of the fact that I'm not familiar with the class skill system. If I were to fight with him again, I'm afraid I don't know who would win." At this point, the apostle paused for a while and said, "I've played games for so many years, but this is the first time I've met such a scary guy. This guy should be the strongest player on the other side." This, Lok Bai frowned and looked back at Wang Yu opposite him. "I'm afraid he's not." Chapter 1905. Lok Bai had never fought against Evildoers Run Wild directly before. Although he knew that Evildoers Run Wild was very strong, he didn't have a clear understanding of it. However, Lok Bai had fought against Wang Yu directly. Even so, Lok Bai still didn't have a concrete upper limit on how strong Wang Yu was. To be able to make someone as ruthless as Lok Bai unfathomable, his terrifying strength and skills had already surpassed the understanding of experts at Lok Bai's level. As the apostle's old partner, Lok Bai obviously knew the upper limit of the apostle's strength. In comparison, no matter how strong Evildoers Run Wild was, he was only evenly matched with the apostle. At least he could let everyone feel the edge. As for Wang Yu's strength, it was a real mystery. The unknown was always full of fear. Logically speaking, Lok Bai naturally knew who was stronger and who was weaker. In Lok Bai's eyes, the apostle's doubts were just overthinking. The fifth match was undoubtedly Wang Yu's turn. The result of the match was also obvious. Although the motley crew had only fought a few matches, everyone had seen Wang Yu's strength. Based on Wang Yu's strength, no one would be able to win in a one-on-one battle. This was also the consensus of everyone. Knowing that their opponent was unbeatable, the Templar team obviously wouldn't give Wang Yu the chance to kill their comrade to boost their opponent's morale. So, in the fifth match, the Templar team chose to surrender. The first match was won by the motley crew with a score of 4-0. As for the motley crew's victory, the audience was no longer surprised. After all, after a few matches, everyone had a general understanding of the motley crew's strength. This team's combat strength was polarized. There were experts, and they were so strong that the other top teams would have a headache. There were also experts, so weak that they were only at the level of an ordinary professional player. It made people feel that they were lucky to be able to fight in a world-class competition. However, it was this kind of team that became a thorn in everyone's eyes. No one had ever seen a team that played so casually. There was no doubt that those few experts would be able to win the first match with an advantage. This was a fact that was already set in stone. As for the second match, it was completely up to fate. If he could win, then he would fight. If he couldn't, then he would just run away. However, although there were not many points for the second match, it was still a full 10 points. Furthermore, it was a random system, so there was no free choice at all. If the overall strength of the battle team was not up to standard, being overtaken by the opponent was something to be expected. In the resting room of the Templar battle team, Locke pointed at the motley crowd on the sand table and said, "The tactics of this motley crowd battle team are basically transparent. In the first round, they let the ones who can fight, in the second round, they let the ones who can run, and in the third round, they let the ones who can scheme. Although these three tactics are simple, they are also brutal. If we can't counter them, we will fall into their trap and lose for sure." "Understood." Jeff rubbed his chin and nodded. "How do we do it?" This fellow's words were still concise and clear, going straight to the point. "Very simple," Locke said. "Let's just study the tactical layout for the third round. We don't have to worry about the second round." "Why?" Jeff was puzzled. Locke analyzed. "According to my observation, in the previous few matches of the motley crowd battle team, their tactical focus was on the third round. In the second round, they usually leave it up to fate and try not to lose points." Speaking of this, Locke pondered for a moment and said, "Although the individual strength of this motley crowd battle team is somewhat uneven, their team battle strategy is still quite good. Moreover, their commander is very adaptable. The Free Battle Team and the Arilang Battle Team were led by them and couldn't react in time. That was why they lost in the third round. Therefore, we must focus on the team battle strategy for the last round to ensure that there are no mistakes. As for the second round, let it be. After all, it is the opponent's home map. Based on their character, they will definitely not give us too many chances to tie the score." Makes sense. Hearing Locke's analysis, everyone in the Templar battle team nodded. Indeed, the motley crowd battle team's playing style was too shameless. If they really set up a super large map like the Lost Forest to play hide-and-seek with you, there was nothing you could do. What was more infuriating was that this group of guys took the shameless path and set up a shameless persona. Not only did the audience feel that it was reasonable, even their opponents felt that it was natural. How infuriating was that? When the St. Hall battle team was studying the third team battle strategy, on the side of the motley crowd battle team, Wuji opened the deduction sand table in the arena for the first time. "Wuji, this is only the second round. It's not your style to be so anxious to study the strategy." Seeing that Wuji opened the sand table, everyone couldn't help but ask with a smile. Wuji's tactical style had always been to adapt to the situation. Even in the third team battle, they rarely deduced the battle situation. At this time, they opened the sand table in the second round, which was somewhat unexpected. "What do you know?" Wuji rolled his eyes at everyone and said, "Whether we can win the game or not, the key lies in the second round." "Second round?" Mingdu was a little surprised and asked, "Is there something wrong with you? Shouldn't the second round be up to fate?" Mingdu's doubt was also reasonable. After all, in the past, there were too many uncontrollable factors in the second round. The motley crowd battle team's strength was also not balanced, so there would never be a battle strategy in the second round. That was in the past. Wuji said, "How can it be the same this time? Our strength and strategy have been clearly understood by our opponent. How can a smart guy like Locke not be prepared for the third round? You have to know that they are the home team in the third round." It had to be said that Wuji's thinking had always been ahead of everyone else. Chuanjin's group was quite strong. Although there was still a gap between them and the top players, they could still fight back and forth with normal pro players. In the past, when they were against normal pro players, there was no need for Wang Yu and the others to go up in the first round to get points. Everyone was using fake moves and could lead the opponent by the nose and make it difficult for the opponent to figure out their strength. But now it was different from the past. The motley crowd battle team's current opponents were all world-class pro players. If they wanted to score points, they had to let Wang Yu and the others go up. After a few rounds, the motley crowd battle team's strength had been clearly understood by everyone. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Now that the motley crowd battle team's strength had been figured out, of course, their tactical patterns had also been thoroughly studied. How to set up and how to guard against the few pro players on their side, of course, the opponent had also studied them. Mobile version of the fastest updated website, M. Chapter 1906. As the saying goes, change leads to change. Against a world-class tactician like Lok Bai, they would be digging a hole for themselves if they stuck to the same old routine. It would be fine if the motley crew had chosen the map on their home ground for the third match, but now that the third match was on their opponent's home ground, no matter how arrogant Wuji was, he would not look down on a world-class expert so much. Therefore, it was safer to place their hopes on their own home ground. That's not easy, everyone thought for a while and said, we are not as strong as them, and the second match is a random duel. How can we arrange this? Everyone from Chuanjin naturally knew the difference between them and their opponent. In terms of overall strength, more than half of the players from the motley crew were not as strong as their opponent. They could still choose the players to fight in the first match and rely on Wang Yu and the others to have a slight advantage. The second match was randomly chosen by the system, which was uncontrollable. If it was a team battle, they still had a chance of winning, but if it was a duel, the difference in strength was not so easy to make up for. If we are not strong enough, we'll make up for it with the terrain. Wuji pointed at the map and said, this time, our main goal is to choose a map that is advantageous to everyone. The most important thing is to not let the opponent score. In that case, the more complex the map, the better. Chun Xiang muttered, the more complex the terrain, the more suitable it is for us to use tactics. Chun Xiang was also a tactical player, and warlocks were more control-oriented. Complex terrain was more suitable for Chun Xiang's fighting style. Okay. Wuji nodded and said as he filtered, anything else? Yes. Exquisite Dream added, the bigger the map, the better. She was an archer, so she had to fly kites. Exquisite Dream was not a non-mainstream player like Yang Na, so she naturally did not like small map. Moreover, it did not matter if they were not strong enough and could not defeat the opponent. If the map was big, they could still run. At most, they would all die together. The map has to be big. Wuji asked again, anything else? The more hidden the better, Baiming Yuyu added after thinking for a while. Assassins were a sneak attack profession. The more hidden the map, the more advantageous it was for the assassin. The more distinct the layering, the better, Mingdu said forcefully before Wuji could ask again. Layering? What's that? Everyone asked Mingdu in confusion. It's the level of the map. Mingdu roared anxiously. I can't run or turn invisible, and I don't have many crowd control skills. If I choose a plain map, won't I be in a bad situation? I see. After listening to Mingdu's explanation, everyone instantly understood that the sense of hierarchy that this kid was talking about was similar to the stairs and roofs. Mingdu was a pure damage output mage. His movement speed was not high. If he wanted to deal as much damage as Wuji was afraid of, he had to rely on certain special terrains to occupy a higher position. Otherwise, even if he had the second flash skill, if he fought on flat ground, the difference was only a matter of dying sooner or later. Moreover, compared to top-tier professional players, the people from the Quanzhen sect might be amateurs when it came to fighting, but they were very professional when it came to escaping. Back then, when the people from the Quanzhen sect were chasing after them, they had relied on walking on rooftops to escape. Thus, a sense of hierarchy was essential for a motley crew. Understood. Wuji snapped his fingers and turned around to ask Wang Yu, do you have any requests? Me? Wang Yu thought for a while and said, let's just choose the arena. That saves me the trouble of looking for it. F***ck off. Everyone pointed their middle fingers at him. No one asked this grandson anymore. It could not be helped, those who were powerful would have the confidence to do anything. In fact, Wang Yu wanted to keep a low profile, but his strength did not allow him to do so. Ignoring the anti-human Wang Yu, Wu Ji began to filter the scenes in his hands. After sifting for a full 3 minutes, Wu Ji finally found a scene that suited everyone's specialties the most. Dark forest. The forest terrain had always been an ambush terrain, so it was obvious that it was hidden. Although the dark forest was not as vast as the lost forest, it was still boundless. Not to mention the complicated terrain of the dense forest, the tree branches and the tree trunks that were high up on the ground also matched the layering that Mingdu had mentioned. This map could be used for ambushes, kiting, escaping, harassing, and any dirty tricks like hitting people with bricks and stabbing people in the butt could be used with twice the results with half the effort in this map. It could be said that it was a perfect map for the motley crew. To be able to pick such a unique scene out of thousands of maps, one had to admit that Wu Ji was a genius. After both teams finished discussing their tactics, the intermission ended. Both teams entered the gaming pods again and entered the venue with confident expressions. The second match between the motley crew and the St. Church team had officially begun. For the second match, the motley crew would choose their home map. As the team leader, Wang Yu chose the scene that had been filtered out in the resting room without any hesitation, the dark forest. As Wang Yu pressed the confirm button, the arena began to distort and change. Soon, a huge dark forest appeared in front of the audience. TSK. The motley crew's style was now deeply rooted in the hearts of the audience. Seeing that the motley crew had chosen the forest again, the audience could not help but sigh helplessly. Those who knew these guys would know that once the motley crew had chosen this map, it would be a boring game of hide-and-seek for the next 5 rounds. Damn it, these bastards really have no new ideas. Are they going to use this kind of unchanging strategy until the finals? Fortunately, the audience had some understanding of the motley crew's style. Otherwise, they would be clamoring for a refund. Thinking about it from another perspective, these guys were after all the weak group, so it was understandable that they would use all sorts of method. If it was any other team that dared to do this, the audience would probably have started cursing them. This was the advantage of being shameless. Everyone would think that you were shameless, so as long as you threw away your face, the whole world would make way for you. Of course, this was just a fictitious description in the novel. It didn't mean that the author was a shameless fellow. On the contrary, the author was humble, elegant, and upright. He was a very gentlemanly person. If he wasn't careful, he would accidentally go overboard, hee. Seeing that the motley crew had chosen the forest map as expected, a satisfied smile appeared on Locke's face. Although Locke and the others knew how disgusting the forest map was in this kind of competition, the more the motley crew chose the forest map, the more it proved that they were at their wits' end, and the more it proved that their strategy was correct. P.S. Did everyone think that there would be no second update? Chapter 1907. After choosing the battleground, 2 beams of light descended, and 2 players from both teams were teleported to the dark forest. The Templar Battle Team's player was called Slaughter. He was a warrior and an expert who had been famous for a long time. Although he was a standard warrior, his performance in yesterday's match had been very eye-catching. On the other hand, the Motley Crowd Team's player was Exquisite Dream, a female player. Logically speaking, Dream of exquisite strength was slightly weaker than the members of Quan Jun. In terms of raw power, she was not even a match for Mingjian Daoxue, who was a burden to the team. However, her control skills made her slightly more valuable than Mingjian Daoxue in the team. In a top-level competition like this, such a gap was almost negligible. Because of this, Exquisite Dream was often ridiculed by Mingdu as the Chuanjin team's double noobs. It had to be said that this slut had a foul mouth. Just based on this point, this brat deserved to be ganged up on and beaten up by the Chuanjian people. He didn't deserve any sympathy at all. Due to Ling Longmeng's unique strength, Wuji rarely arranged for her to go on stage. Not only did the audience not understand Ling Longmeng's strength, even in the databases of the various large battle teams, Ling Longmeng's strength was known as one of the three great mysteries of the Motley team. The other two mysteries were the strength of Wang Yu and the leader of the Motley Crowd team, Mu Zixian. Seeing that the Motley Crowd team's player was a female player, the audience was stunned. After all, in the audience's hearts, female players were naturally weaker than male players. It was surprising that a female player would fight in this kind of situation. However, when everyone saw Exquisite Dreams' class, they all shut their mouth. Archer. This woman was actually an archer. There were very few female players in the S-rank professional league, and even fewer female archers. The last female archer to fight was a player from the Motley Crowd team called Qingxue, who was also Yang Na. As for Yang Na, thinking of Yang Na's squinting eyes, the audience felt a chill down their spine. Meow, this little girl had used her actions to show everyone what it meant to be ruthless and unscrupulous. Whether it was an arrow piercing into the eye to cause physical blindness, or shooting an arrow at close range, as long as this woman made a move, it would shock the world. As a result, the audience now had a deep understanding of the viciousness of women. Their previous mentality of looking down on women had also been corrected. Female players were not to be trifled with, especially the female archers of the motley crew. Slaughter was one of the older members of the Templar team. He looked like a middle-aged uncle, just like Chun Xiang. At the same time, this uncle had the steadiness of a middle-aged man. Seeing that his opponent was a woman, Slaughter's expression did not change in the slightest. It was as if his opponent's strength had nothing to do with him. Instead, he stared at Exquisite Dream, raised his sword in a professional manner, and prepared for battle as carefully and seriously as he usually did in training. In comparison, Ling Longmeng's actions were more subtle. After entering the battlefield, she began to look around. Who knew what she was researching? Exquisite Dream's actions did not escape Slaughter's eyes. He knew that his opponent was definitely looking for an escape route. Sure enough, as soon as the match began, Ling Longmeng immediately turned around and ran towards the back of the arena without a word. Slaughter smiled faintly and raised his sword. A battle chi slash flew out and chopped towards Exquisite Dream's back. At the same time that he swung the battle chi slash, he lowered his head and charged towards Exquisite Dream. Running away to stall for time was an old trick of the motley crew. Before entering the battlefield, Lok Bai had explained that the second match was not important to the Templar team. Because of the strength of the opponent in the second match, the opponent would definitely play hide and seek as usual. It would be difficult to increase the score, so there was not much pressure in the second match. If they could score, then they would score. If they couldn't, then there was no need to be too nervous. As a top player, the desire to score was naturally innate. Even if Lok Bai said that scoring was not important, Slaughter still wanted to close the gap as much as possible. Therefore, after entering the battlefield, Slaughter had been staring at Exquisite Dream, observing her movements. In the instant that Exquisite Dream turned to the right, Slaughter accurately estimated her movement. Without hesitation, he used the battle chi slash to seal off Exquisite Dream's escape route. Bang! The battle chi slash accurately struck Exquisite Dream's back. Exquisite Dream, who was running away, swayed from the impact. In the blink of an eye, Slaughter had already charged towards Exquisite Dream's back. He raised his longsword with both hands and stabbed towards Exquisite Dream's back. Charge followed by lunge followed by rising dragon was the starting move of a warrior's combo. With Exquisite Dream's low HP and priority, as long as she was hit, she would definitely die. Exquisite Dream's reaction speed was not considered fast for an expert like Slaughter. However, Slaughter's battle chi slash was not a control skill. The moment she was hit by the battle chi slash, Exquisite Dream didn't even look back. She raised her hand and shot an arrow at the tree trunk above her right. In the instant that the Slaughter stinger struck Exquisite Dream, her figure flickered and she appeared on top of a tree branch. Seeing Exquisite Dream dodge his attack in such a strange manner, Slaughter couldn't help but be taken aback. His face revealed a hint of surprise as he smiled. "Interesting. But do you think you can run away?" As he spoke, Slaughter leaped into the air, raised his greatsword, and used Collapsing Mountain in midair. Collapsing Mountain was an air-to-ground skill. Leaping and Collapsing Mountain, Nie Yen successfully completed his second jump. Leaping to Exquisite Dream's position, Nie Yen swung his greatsword at her. Ling Long Meng did not panic. She raised the crossbow in her hand and shot an arrow at another tree. Immediately after, she appeared on another tree. "What? You can do that?" Seeing this, the audience was dumbfounded. Wow, this motley crew really was an eye-opener. They didn't have many real skills, but their escaping skills were guaranteed to be professional. Seeing his opponent dodge his attack again, Slaughter frowned and immediately cancelled his skill. He grabbed his greatsword with both hands and swung it at the tree trunk. At the same time, he stomped on the tree trunk with both feet and kicked off. Duong! Slaughter slammed his greatsword into the tree trunk. With the added strength from his legs, he shot out like a cannonball and chased after Exquisite Dream. This guy is quite strong. Seeing this scene, everyone in the motley crew revealed a look of surprise. The reason why Exquisite Dream could teleport in the forest was because of the special nature of her class. However, Slaughter relied on his own skills to move around in the forest. Moreover, he actually followed closely behind Exquisite Dream. No one dared to imagine such a maneuver. As expected of a top expert, his understanding of the game was not something ordinary players could compare to. Chapter 1908. Good, that's it. Old friend, don't give him a chance. Seeing Carnage chasing after Exquisite Dream, the members of the Templar team were excited and cheered. The audience couldn't help but worry for Exquisite Dream. Archers were famous for having low health and mana. If Exquisite Dream relied on her skills to move, she obviously wouldn't be able to last long. Moreover, this girl wasn't as tough as Yang Na. If Carnage caught up to her, it would be difficult for her to escape death. Although the audience didn't have a good impression of the motley crew, Exquisite Dream looked like a pretty girl. Subjectively, many people were more inclined towards Exquisite Dream. However, just when everyone was worried about Ling Long Meng herself revealed a smile. Exquisite Dream could move through the forest by relying on her skills. So although she could move a little further, her skills had cooldowns and she would be stunned for a short period of time when she used her skills. Carnage's movement was based on his basic jumping ability. Not only did it not have a cooldown, it was also very natural to use it. Although the distance he could move wasn't far, he could jump continuously. In comparison, Carnage's movement speed was even higher than Exquisite Dream's. At this time, he was gradually closing in on Exquisite Dream. Fortunately, Exquisite Dream was the one running away and had the initiative. Otherwise, she might have been caught by Carnage. Just like that, the two leapt through the forest, one chasing the other. Although it was just a boring game of hide and seek like the previous few matches, this time it was very entertaining. In the past, it really didn't have any technical content. Now, at least with the addition of parkour, it looked quite interesting. However, because Exquisite Dream's speed was slightly lower, every time she was about to be caught by Carnage, she had to change direction. Not long after, the chase between the two of them turned into a circle around the forest. After watching parkour for a long time, the audience became a little bored. Seeing the two start to run in circles, the audience said, "Running around like this is a waste of time. You might as well surrender." After all, Exquisite Dream was using a skill. Her mana would eventually run out. It was only a matter of time before she was caught. There was no point in running in circles now. Old Dream, can you last 30 minutes running like this? Even the motley crew felt a headache when they saw this. Running away to buy time was to shake off the opponent and not give the opponent a chance to kill him. However, the opponent was chasing after him like a mad dog, and this was somewhat frustrating. Although everyone knew that Exquisite Dream was a player who focused all her points on intelligence and had a very long mana bar, this unique skill also consumed a lot of mana. There was no way she could last for 30 minutes. After all, Exquisite Dream wasn't an agile archer. Once she used up all her skills, she would basically be a sitting duck. If he wanted to escape, he wouldn't be able to hold on for 30 minutes. Wuji waved his hand and said, "But Old Meng obviously didn't want to escape." Why do you say that?" Everyone asked in confusion. "Can't you see?" Without waiting for Wuji to explain, Wang Yu pointed at Exquisite Dream and said, "Can't you see that Old Dream is running around in circles? What's wrong with going around in circles?" Everyone was confused again. The reason why Linglong Dream was circling around was because she wasn't fast enough. She needed to change directions to shake off her target. "Haven't you noticed that the circle is getting smaller and smaller?" Wang Yu asked again. After hearing Wang Yu's words, everyone finally realized the crux of the problem. Logically speaking, going around in circles would not cause the circle to shrink. Otherwise, the distance between them and the target would only grow smaller and smaller. At that time, the unlucky one would definitely be the one running away. Linglong Meng was no fool. Going around in circles would only result in her own death. Yet, she still chose to do so. It was obvious that she was plotting something. Just as the motley crew was talking, the shrinking of Exquisite Dream's circle was becoming more and more obvious. This girl is a little silly." Seeing this, the audience held their foreheads and smiled bitterly. How can she go around in circles like that? Isn't she digging a hole for herself? Seeing this, Lok Bai could not help but be surprised. Not good, the circle is getting smaller. There must be a trap. Slaughter is going to be tricked. It had to be said that Lok Bai was very sharp in both foresight and thinking. When he realized that Exquisite Dream's circle was getting smaller and smaller, he immediately realized what Exquisite Dream was thinking. However, the onlookers see more clearly than the players. At this time, Slaughter's mind was completely focused on the escaping Exquisite Dream. He only noticed the distance between the two and did not realize that Exquisite Dream's circle was getting smaller and smaller. At this time, Slaughter was getting closer and closer to Exquisite Dream. How could he pay attention to other things? Under the watchful eyes of the audience, Exquisite Dream's circle was shrinking to the extreme. Finally, the distance between the two was less than 3 meters. Exquisite Dream's figure flashed, and she jumped from the tree to the ground. Finally running out of mana. Slaughter was overjoyed when he saw this. He held his big sword and descended from the sky. After chasing for so long, Slaughter had been counting Exquisite Dream's skill release. From the beginning until now, Exquisite Dream had released her displacement skill a total of 64 times. In terms of an archer's mana, Exquisite Dream's mana was already terrifying. However, an archer was an archer after all. Sooner or later, their mana would run out. 64 skills was definitely Exquisite Dream's limit. Unexpectedly, Linglong Meng did not panic in the slightest when she saw the Slaughter descending from the sky. Instead, she smiled faintly and took a step back. "Pada!" At this moment, a crisp sound rang out. Slaughter suddenly felt his feet sink. He did not know when there was an extra trap under his feet. Slaughter sneered at the trap under his feet and asked Exquisite Dream in rusty Mandarin, "This is your last resort?" The leader was Meng Shi, so it was not surprising that the players of the Templar battle team knew Mandarin. Yes. Exquisite Dream put away her crossbow. She hugged her shoulders with her right hand and rested her chin on the back of her left hand. She smiled charmingly and said, "What? Do you have a problem with that?" "Humph." Slaughter snorted coldly and said, "You underestimate me too much." Slaughter was after all a top-grade warrior. It was indeed somewhat ridiculous to think that a mere trap could catch him. As he spoke, Slaughter suddenly exerted force under his feet and crushed Exquisite Dream's trap. Then he raised his weapon and leaped towards Exquisite Dream. Exquisite Dream did not dodge. She opened and closed her right palm and shouted, "Collect!" Whoosh 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 whoosh. Following Ling Long Meng's command, countless black shadows stretched out from all directions. Like long snakes, they instantly bound the leaping carnage in mid-air. Chapter 1909. What's going on? Seeing the countless black shadows trapping Slaughter in mid-air, everyone's eyes widened. Even Wang Yu and the others revealed a look of surprise. Although they knew that Exquisite Dream might be scheming to kill, they didn't expect Exquisite Dream to have such a killer move. Hee hee. At this moment, Exquisite Dream smiled indifferently and said, "How can a trap work against an expert like you? If I want to run, do you think you can catch up with me?" So that's how it is. As expected of old Meng. Hearing Ling Long Meng's words, Wuji immediately understood what was going on, and he sincerely gave the Ling Long Gate a thumbs up. Indeed, for a top expert like Slaughter, 1 or 2 traps would definitely not be able to catch him. To completely trap him, a bigger trap was needed. Archers above level 60 had a shooting range of 30 meters, which meant that Exquisite Dream's Shadow Clone arrow had a maximum teleportation distance of about 30 meters. If Ling Long Dream really wanted to escape, she could teleport a terrifying distance of 30 meters. No one would be able to catch her. The reason why Slaughter had stuck close to her was because he wanted to draw her into his trap step by step. If he guessed correctly, when Exquisite Dream teleported, she must have set up traps at every landing point. At this moment, the system's camera switched to a close-up of Exquisite Dream's previous landing point. Sure enough, there was an arrow stuck in the place where Exquisite Dream had landed. The shadow that trapped Slaughter was extending from the arrow. "Goodbye." Ling Long Meng looked at the bound Slaughter and lightly snapped her fingers. At the same time, a dot appeared under Exquisite Dream and Slaughter's feet. The difference was that under Exquisite Dream's feet was a white dot with the words, "Life Gate," written on it, while under Slaughter's feet was a black dot with the words, "Death Gate," written on it. Boom! In an instant, beams of fiery light soared into the sky, and the arrows surrounding Ling Long Meng and Yi Shiwen exploded. 64 arrows detonated at the same time in 8 directions, and the flames spread along the black shadows and instantly spread to Slaughter. From the perspective of the audience, the explosion of the arrows formed a huge 8 trigrams. A line of words also appeared above Ling Long Meng's head, awakening 8 Gates Shadow Killer Array. Exquisite Dream was an archer with full intelligence. Her magic damage was so high that it was comparable to that of an average mage. Not to mention 64 explosive traps, even 64 fireballs would be enough to instantly kill anyone. One could imagine the outcome of such a massacre. Standing in the Death Gate, Slaughter didn't even have the right to struggle, and was blown into a white light by this terrifying explosion on the spot. Under the astonished gazes of the audience, the system announced that the ragtag team, Ling Long Dream, had won the first round. No wonder I've never seen this move before. So it's an awakening skill. The power of this skill is simply, seeing the name of the skill above Exquisite Dream's head, the motley crowd battle team were both surprised and delighted. Awakening skills were powerful moves. Under normal circumstances, players would not let go of them. Only, to everyone's surprise, Exquisite Dream's awakening skill was so frightening. Whether it was its special effects, control effects, or lethality, it far surpassed an ordinary player's awakening skill. It had to be known that even an awakening skill could, at most, put someone on the brink of death. However, Exquisite Dream's awakening skill was able to instantly kill a top-tier warrior. It's normal for it to be powerful. At this time, Wang Yu rubbed his chin and said, for such a complicated awakening skill, it would be abnormal if its power was average. This old cow's words make sense. Hearing Wang Yu's words and thinking back to Exquisite Dream's actions when she released the skill, everyone couldn't help but nod their heads. This 8 gates shadow kill formation seemed to be extremely powerful, but the 64 traps laid out were a little too complicated. If it weren't for the terrain advantage, Exquisite Dream wouldn't have been able to lay out such a powerful skill. Moreover, this skill was clearly a large-scale ambush skill. If used in a one-on-one fight, its hit rate wouldn't be high. After all, if it weren't for special circumstances, no idiot would foolishly jump into such a huge trap. Slaughter had fallen into Exquisite Dream's trap completely because he had been careless and didn't understand his opponent. With such a high hit rate and complicated casting process, if the power of this skill wasn't outstanding, Exquisite Dream would probably delete her account. After Slaughter was blasted to death, the second player from the Templar battle team also appeared on the stage. The second player was called Greed. This guy was very short and carried a dagger in his hand. It was obvious that he was an assassin. Greed wasn't as famous as the other experts in the Templar battle team. On the contrary, this guy had a young face and was obviously a newbie. However, to be able to be included in the main team of the Templar battle team, his strength couldn't be underestimated. After all, an expert like Cthulhu was only a second-line substitute in the Templar battle team. The reason why the second round was called a wheel battle was because after the first round, the state of the winner wouldn't be refreshed. In other words, at this time, not only were Exquisite Dream's skills still on cooldown, but her health and mana had also not recovered. At the beginning of the first round, Exquisite Dream had eaten 2 of Slaughter's skills, leaving her with only 2/3 of her health. Moreover, Exquisite Dream had jumped here and there to arrange the 8 gates shadow kill formation. She had used more than 60 trap skills and clone arrow skills. At this time, her mana had naturally been depleted. Exquisite Dream's strength was originally far inferior to the top expert. The assassin was also a profession that restrained the archer. At the moment, with Exquisite Dream's current state, the result of the match was also expected. Compared to the brilliant performance of Exquisite Dream in the first round, which led the opponent step by step into the trap, the second round of the competition was a lot simpler. After the start of the match, Greed directly activated Sneak, sneaked behind Exquisite Dream, and stabbed her in the back. Exquisite Dream was killed in less than a round. That's right, the second round of the competition was that simple. The audience thought that Exquisite Dream had left some traps and were waiting for the plot to reverse. In the end, the system had already sent a notification that the second round had ended. Damn! Such a strong start and weak finish of the game made the audience cry out. Even Greed, who was on the stage, was somewhat at a loss. What's going on with this archer? Wasn't he very powerful in the first round? How could he be defeated so easily? This didn't make sense. Of course, this seemingly unscientific scene was actually very scientific for Exquisite Dream. Exquisite Dream was more pragmatic than most of the Chuanjian players. As soon as Greed entered the stage, Exquisite Dream made a calculation. The result of the calculation, whether it was the winning rate or the escape rate, was 0. Since there was no hope of winning, Exquisite Dream naturally wouldn't be like the protagonist in the hot-blooded shonen manga who put up a futile struggle. In comparison, it was easier to just die outside the stage. Chapter 1910. After all, Exquisite Dream's damage came from her skills. At this moment, Exquisite Dream was already out of mana. She couldn't even do the most basic thing. If she continued, her opponent would only see more of her weaknesses. After Exquisite Dream was killed, The pillar of light flashed once more and Chun Xiang was teleported into the arena. Aya, this motley crew sure has bad luck. Seeing Chun Xiang enter the stage, the audience couldn't help but shake their heads. When it came to PvP, assassins were definitely kings. In this kind of competition, assassins had almost no natural enemies. Even the arch-rival tank classes were helpless against assassins due to the tournament rules. As for other classes, they were basically no match for assassins. As for warlocks, there was no need to even mention them. Warlocks weren't considered to be a combat class. Like priests, warlocks were a support class. Their long skill prerequisites meant that warlocks were weak in 1v1 duels. Unless it was a group battle or PvE, warlocks were basically useless. Moreover, warlocks were cloth-armored classes. Their defense and health weren't too high. This kind of thin-skinned class was definitely the favorite of assassins. Although Chun Xiang's performance in the previous matches was not bad, this was the finals. Every player on stage was a world-class expert. In comparison, Chun Xiang's previous performances were somewhat lacking. Moreover, his opponent was an assassin. Greed was still a young man. Compared to the calm Slaughter, Greed lacked the calm temperament of an expert. In this competition, assassins had been greatly weakened. The cooldown of stealth had been extended. Stealth was an assassin's most important skill. In the previous match against Exquisite Dream, Greed had already used stealth and backstab. Both skills were currently on cooldown. Under normal circumstances, Greed should have pulled away from Chun Xiang and waited for his stealth skill to come off cooldown. However, instead of retreating, Greed advanced. As soon as the match began, he raised his dagger and charged at Chun Xiang. Haha, you're quite smart. Seeing Greed charge at him, Chun Xiang smiled in surprise. Indeed, under normal circumstances, an assassin without stealth should have pulled away and waited for cooldown to come off cooldown. However, that was only for ordinary players. How could Chun Xiang be an ordinary player? This old thing's playstyle could be said to be the limit of a dirty playstyle. Although he didn't have any trap skills, he would dig holes everywhere. As long as Chun Xiang was given time, this guy would be able to dig holes and sneak attack. Spring Xiang's trap wasn't just a trap. This old bastard's calculation and control of his skills had practically reached the pinnacle of perfection. Once he dug a trap, it would be a chain of traps. As long as the first trap was set, he would advance step by step until the other party died. Thus, while it might seem like he was giving himself time to wait for his skills to cool down, it also gave Chun Xiang time to set up the battlefield. Being able to find the right remedy was a necessary quality for an expert. As a pro player, Greed had naturally researched his opponent's information before the match. He also knew what kind of person Chun Xiang was. His seemingly reckless playstyle was actually a very smart choice. The distance between the two was only about 10 meters. After activating Quickstep, the assassin's speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, Greed arrived at Chun Xiang's side. Without giving Chun Xiang any time to prepare, the assassin raised his dagger and stabbed at his chest. Chun Xiang naturally wasn't the type of person to sit and wait for death. Seeing Greed's dagger coming at him, Chun Xiang hurriedly raised the staff in his hand to block. However, Chun Xiang was a class with practically zero close combat skills. Fighting a melee master like the assassin in melee combat was a joke in and of itself. Greed swung his dagger, crouched down, and sped up. He circled around Chun Xiang's staff and arrived behind Chun Xiang. He grabbed the dagger with both hands and fiercely stabbed at Chun Xiang's lower back. Attacks from the back had a damage bonus. When an assassin attacked from the back, the bonus was doubled. If this stab was solid, it would definitely be enough to make Chun Xiang suffer. However, the instant Greed's dagger stabbed into Chun Xiang's body suddenly turned into a cloud of smoke. Ah! Greed didn't pay attention and almost fell to the ground. After dodging his opponent's attack, Chun Xiang quickly condensed into a solid form. He pointed his staff at Greed, and a green poisonous fog shrouded Greed's head. Greed's reaction was also extremely fast. He pressed his left hand on the ground and forcefully stabilized his body. Then, he rolled back to Chun Xiang's feet. He grabbed the dagger with his right hand and raised it up. A sword light from bottom to top was aimed at Chun Xiang's chin. However, at this moment, Greed's eyes glanced at the corner of Chun Xiang's mouth. Greed's heart suddenly thumped when he saw this. Boom! At the same time, a familiar voice sounded in Greed's ears. A black barrier rose from the ground and appeared between Chun Xiang and Greed. Duong! Greed felt his feet sink. The dagger that was originally on Chun Xiang's chin could no longer move, and Greed himself was firmly nailed to the ground. Dark barrier! Break! It must be said that Greed was worthy of being a top expert. After being restricted by Chun Xiang's dark barrier, Greed didn't think about it and stretched his arms to both sides. A black light burst out from Greed's body and dispelled the immobilizing effect. Then, Greed grabbed the dagger with both hands and took advantage of the situation to push it forward towards Chun Xiang. Hee. Chun Xiang smiled slightly and gently took a step back, just in time to dodge Greed's attack. Greed was just about to step forward to chase, but the result was that his feet sank again. A vine wrapped around Greed's legs. Everyone knew what would happen if one's feet were suddenly grabbed while running. Originally, the pitiful Greed thought that the match would be over once he dispelled the darkness barrier. Who could have imagined that Chun Xiang's control skill would be so wretched? He had actually hidden a bunch of vines beneath the darkness barrier. Being caught off guard again, Greed stumbled once more. Clearly, he had fallen flat on his face. Toxic Nova. Before Greed could rejoice, Chun Xiang turned the staff in his hand and smashed it on the ground. Shwa. With a soft sound, a circle of green lights spread out with Chun Xiang as the center. Although Toxic Nova was a full-screen skill, it could be blocked by obstacles. In this complicated forest terrain, if Greed was far away from Chun Xiang, he could naturally use the trees to avoid the attack of Toxic Nova. However, Greed had already rushed to Chun Xiang's side and was less than 2 meters away. At such a distance, there was not the slightest bit of cover or obstacles between the two. This Toxic Nova, of course, was full. Shwa. After being poisoned by Chun Xiang, Greed was dyed green from head to toe by Chun Xiang. Chapter 1911. 220 After being poisoned by Soaring Springs Poison Nova, a green damage number floated above Greed's head. Continuous HP loss. Soaring Springs damage wasn't high, but seeing this small damage number, the members of the Templar battle team revealed a nervous expression. Warlock poisons were generally divided into two types: debuff and continuous HP loss. Debuff, as the name suggested, was to weaken various attributes, such as movement speed and defense. The effect was similar to that of a control type. Although this type of poison was disgusting, it was still manageable for experts. After all, the debuff effect was not as good as that of a control-type skill, and this type of poison was easier to dispel. However, the continuous HP loss type of poison was more of a headache. The HP loss from this type of poison was actually not much. Currently, the strongest poison on the market would only lose around 100 HP per second. Including the skill bonuses, it would only lose 200 to 300 HP per second at most. Compared to the tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of HP of players, the amount of HP loss was almost negligible. The reason why it was a headache was because when a player lost HP, recovery and healing skills were basically useless. Even dispel skills would have a hard time dispelling the HP loss. The most frustrating thing was that under the continuous HP loss state, players would be forced into a short period of stun due to the reduction of their HP. Rigidity was one of the most annoying settings in Rebirth. No matter how short the stun period was, if a class had a stun, the player's skills and attacks would be forcibly interrupted. The continuous HP loss happened once per second, which meant that the player's stun frequency was also once per second. Not to mention the casting time of a mage, the current high-level skills of all classes would take more than a second to cast and attack the target. Therefore, as long as a warlock was poisoned, apart from instant skills, players would basically be unable to use any skills during the duration of the poison. They wouldn't even be able to use a normal combo. Greed was an assassin whose main skill was ambush. This class's damage came from the explosive burst of skill combo. After all, the assassin was a weak melee class. If they couldn't kill their opponent in one hit, their survival rate was extremely low. However, at this moment, Greed's HP was continuously reduced by Soaring Spring, and he couldn't use skills or combo. At this moment, Greed's combat power was directly reduced by half. Without stealth, the assassin's combat power was already reduced by half. Now that he had lost his combo and skills, Greed was completely crippled. Die! Who would have thought that after Chun Xiang's HP continued to drop, Greed didn't have the slightest intention of retreating. Instead, with a loud roar, he swung his sword and chopped off the vines beneath his feet. He rolled on the ground and arrived in front of Chun Xiang, then raised his sword and stabbed. In the end, an assassin was still an assassin. Even if they couldn't use skills or combos, even if they didn't have stealth, they were still kings in the duel arena. Killing a warlock in close combat was still a piece of cake. 220 However, just as Greed rolled to Chun Xiang's feet, another damage number popped up above his head. Greed's figure paused slightly, and the dagger in his hand stiffened. Chun Xiang took the opportunity to take half a step back, putting some distance between him and Greed. He opened the book of sealing in his left hand and a green evil spirit appeared between the two of them. The evil spirit opened its mouth, revealing its deathly white teeth. It roared and pounced at Greed. At the same time, Spring Soaring pointed his staff at the evil spirit, and a faint green radiance was emitted from its body. Not good. It's self-destruction. In Rebirth, although self-destruction was a very shameless skill, its characteristics were also very clear. Before any self-destruction skill was released, there would be a warning. For example, the faint green radiance on the evil spirit was a prelude to self-destruction. Greed was also a veteran, so he naturally recognized the light of self-destruction. When he saw the light emitted from the evil spirit in front of him, he was startled and hurriedly leaned back. His feet fiercely stomped on the ground, and his entire body flew backward almost horizontally. Boom! Chun Xiang's evil spirit exploded, and the explosion covered an area of 500 meters with the evil spirit as the center. Although Greed had avoided the center of the explosion, which dealt the most damage, he was still affected by the aftermath of the explosion. The powerful air wave blew Greed to the side, and the health bar above his head dropped by nearly 10%. Damn! Is it that exaggerated? He could even dodge that? Seeing that Greed hadn't been killed by the explosion, the Chuanjian people were all shocked. Even Chun Xiang couldn't help but be slightly stunned. The range of an evil spirit's explosion was very large. It was almost impossible to dodge the explosion in such a situation. They didn't expect Greed's reaction to be so fast. One had to know that at this moment, Greed was still in a state of continuous health loss. Being able to dodge the explosion in such a situation, even though Chun Xiang was used to seeing Wang Yu's abnormal skills, he was still shocked when he saw Greed's operation at this moment. As expected of a top-notch expert, this high reaction speed was indeed not something that ordinary people could guess. However, fortunately, Chun Xiang didn't think that his evil spirit could kill the target in one blow. Therefore, the moment Greed flew backward, Chun Xiang had already summoned a second evil spirit. Under the push of the explosion, Greed somersaulted backward and landed lightly on the ground. But before Greed could stand firm, Greed felt a sense of oppression coming at him. Greed hurriedly looked up and saw that an evil spirit had appeared in front of him. The evil spirit's face was ferocious, and its body emitted a faint green light. Wang Defa! Seeing this, cold sweat flowed down Greed's back. He cursed and hurriedly jumped to the side again. Boom! The evil spirit exploded again, and the shockwave pushed Greed away. Chun Xiang was known as a meticulous strategist. The traps he dug were always a series of traps. How could he let Greed escape? When Greed dodged to the side, Chun Xiang had already sensed the direction in which Greed would jump. He had already calculated where Greed would land. Before Greed could land, another evil spirit emitting a faint green light appeared under Greed's feet. As a top-notch expert, Greed's reaction was extremely fast. Seeing the evil spirit under his feet, he simultaneously kicked down with both feet, stepping on the evil spirit's head. At the same time, he used the force to jump in the other direction. Boom! Another explosion sounded in the arena. At the same time, Chun Xiang opened the book of sealing in his hands and another evil spirit appeared under Greed's feet. It had to be said that Chun Xiang and Greed were evenly matched. Between the two of them, one released a grenade and the other dodged it. They fought back and forth, and the sound of explosions rang out continuously. The scene was as exciting as a movie, and the audience called it a feast to their heart's content. The players from both teams also watched with great satisfaction. After all, every team's experts understood each other best. It was the first time that the Templar team had seen someone force Greed to such an extent, and it was the first time that the Mob team had seen someone continuously dodge Chun Xiang's attack. Mobile version of the fastest updated website, M. Chapter 1912. After the Summon Evil Spirits skill was maxed out, Chun Xiang could only summon 10 evil spirits in total. It was a waste to use the evil spirits as landmines to bombard the opponent. In the blink of an eye, Chun Xiang's 10 evil spirits were used up, and Greed still had 1/3 of his HP left. Chun Xiang had no choice but to stop the bombardment since the 10 evil spirits did not kill the opponent. Oh? Is this your limit? Seeing that Chun Xiang had stopped attacking, Greed wiped the sweat on his forehead and stared at Chun Xiang coldly. For me, this is just the beginning. As he spoke, Greed activated swift movement. Greed's last landing point was also calculated, and it was less than 5 meters away from Chun Xiang. After activating swift movement, Greed's movement speed skyrocketed. His entire body turned into a blur as he dashed in front of Chun Xiang. His dagger abruptly thrust forward and stabbed into Chun Xiang's chest. How could you forget me? However, at this moment, Chun Xiang's mouth curled into a sinister smile. Before Greed could react, Chun Xiang's arms were already wrapped around Greed's body. At the same time, Chun Xiang's body lit up with a faint white light. This is reckoning. Seeing this familiar holy light, Wuji shouted in surprise. Chun Xiang did not use any other skill. It was the self-destruct skill that Wuji often used, reckoning. F***ck. Why does this warlock know the skills of a holy priest? Seeing Chun Xiang self-destruct, the audience's eyeballs almost popped out. Although dark warlocks and holy priests were both clerics, they belonged to two completely different systems after the branch. One believed in the god of light, while the other studied the origin of darkness. There was an absolute difference in the energy used. How could this warlock use reckoning that only holy priests could use? This was F***king illogical. Boom! Just as the audience and Greed were dumbfounded, Chun Xiang suddenly exploded. The attribute of an evil spirit was the same as the summoner. In order to ensure that his evil spirit had enough ability to tank monsters, Chun Xiang added points to his main quality, and his HP was much higher than that of the assassin in front of him. Moreover, Greed only had 1/3 of his HP left. Although Chun Xiang had taken a direct hit, the damage from the Reckoning House was not something Greed could endure. Under the dazzling holy light, greed was instantly swallowed. It turned into an unremarkable ray of light and was teleported out of the arena. System notification. In the third round of the competition, the ragtag team, Chun Seong, has won. What do you mean? After receiving the system notification, the audience, who were originally confused, became even more confused. The bug is so obvious, but the system turns a blind eye to it? This was too much. Hee hee. However, the motley crew was not surprised at all. Everyone had been fooling around together since the start of the game, so they knew each other very well. As for Spring Source class, Quan Jun naturally knew it as well. Although Chun Seong was a warlock on the surface, he was actually a hidden profession like Wang Yu. He could learn all the skills of the priest profession, including holy priest and dark warlock skills. The reason why people always thought of him as a warlock was because of his occupation. After all, Chun Seong's hidden profession had been changed in the middle of the game. At that time, Chun Seong was already an expert warlock. Everyone who played the game knew that everyone had their own way of adding point. Once mastered, it was difficult to change. Moreover, Chuanjun already had a holy priest, Wuji, which happened to overlap with Chun Seong's class. Therefore, after suddenly changing to a hidden profession, Chun Seong still thought of himself as a warlock and maintained the habits of his occupation. However, after yesterday's match, Wuji pointed out everyone's weaknesses. Chun Seong specifically entered the game and spent money to learn all the priest's skills. At this time, even if Chun Seong used a holy resurrection and made his teammates and underlings all come back to life, Quan Jun would not be surprised at all. The third round of the competition had ended. The current score of the second round was 2-1. Not only did the previous score not decrease, but it had even increased. At this moment, the audience outside the arena began to feel anxious. One had to know that the Templar team had won the competition with overwhelming strength yesterday. It could be said that they were the hot favorites to win this competition. Although the Motley Crowd team performed well, they were much worse than the Templar team. Therefore, the majority of the people in the market bet on the Templar team. The majority of the audience in the arena bet on the Templar team's victory. In the first round, although the Motley Crowd team had won by an overwhelming margin, everyone knew the strength of the Motley Crowd team in the first round and did not feel nervous. However, now that the Templar team was also crushed by the Motley Crowd team in the second round, the audience who had placed their bets finally could not hold it in. This was Shining Silver. Who would not want to live with money? Shady business, there must be shady business. Did the Templar team take the money? It must be. Rumor has it that the Motley Crowd team did something like this during the national competition. Motherf ** how shameless. In this kind of situation, the people who had lost were unable to distinguish right from wrong. Even if they could not find any evidence, they were willing to believe in their own fantasies. For a moment, the audience was filled with curses. Fortunately, the players from both teams were in the arena. If they were in the arena, they would have been thrown water bottles. However, at this moment, the Templar team was still very calm. They had lost so badly, and yet they still looked as if it had nothing to do with them. It was no wonder that the audience would suspect that they had been bribed. Of course, cursing was one thing. As long as there was no violence, the competition would continue. As the pillar of light fell, Lock Bai was transported to the arena in the fourth round. Warlock against Warlock. Both were warlocks, but Lock Bai's position was obviously more of a combat type. From his performance, although Lock Bai had a record of self-destructing, his strength was so high that he had always been regarded as a god by everyone. Seeing that the Templar team had sent Lock Bai up, the restless audience finally calmed down. Now that Lock Bai was on the field, their chances of winning the match were guaranteed. Everyone's hearts were at ease. At the same time, they had a new worry. What if Lock Bai was also easily defeated? Wouldn't that prove that the Templar team had been bribed? For a moment, Everyone's mood was very complicated. However, there was still no suspense in the battle between Lok Bai and Chun Xiang. In the previous round, Chun Xiang had used most of his trump cards. Not only had all the evil spirits exploded, but he had also used his self-destruct skill. At this moment, Chun Xiang only had a little HP left. Not to mention a super expert like Lok Bai, even a fart from a random person could kill him. Chapter 1913. As the match began, Lok Bai raised his hand slightly. A tree beside him was uprooted by Lok Bai's gravity spell. Then, Lok Bai waved his hand and threw it at Chun Xiang. F***CK. Seeing Lok Bai's brutal methods, the audience was shocked. The motley crowd was also dumbfounded. The gravity spell, to put it bluntly, used gravity to attack, defend, and control. Compared to Yu Chuanxiang, who could use poison, crowd control, and explosions, the gravity spell's attack method was relatively simple. Simply put, it was to pick up something from the ground and throw it at someone. In the previous matches, Lok Bai had fought in small arenas like the arena. Apart from the people in the arena, there was not much debris. Lok Bai mostly threw things like broken floorboards. Although it was a little overpowered, it did not make people think that the Gravity Warlock class was that overpowered. However, in this forest, Lok Bai's gravity spell could be said to have found the most suitable battlefield. Damn it, even trees could be uprooted and thrown at people. Wouldn't the forest be filled with Lok Bai's weapons? Chun Xiang's HP was less than 10 points. Not to mention such a huge tree crashing down on him. Even if a tree branch fell on his face, it would be enough to kill him. Faced with Lok Bai's throwing attack, Chun Xiang was on high alert. Before the tree could hit him, Chun Xiang turned around and ran into the depths of the forest. As he ran, he desperately cast healing on his head. Actually, when faced with Lok Bai's attack, turning around and running was the best choice. In the forest, the only weapons Lok Bai could use were the trees around him. At the same time, the forest was densely packed with trees. A tree was a big target. If it was used as a throwing weapon on an endless plain, it would definitely be very powerful. However, in the forest, it was a little out of his reach. The terrain in the forest was extremely complicated. Every tree could be a cover. Chun Xiang ran into the depths of the forest, and the trees in the forest blocked Lok Bai's attack. Hong long long long. The tree that Lok Bai threw smashed the trees in front of him. Chun Xiang took the opportunity to increase the distance between him and Lok Bai. He continuously cast healing on his head and recovered more than half of his HP. Interesting. Seeing that Chun Xiang had used the terrain to avoid his attack and come back to life from the brink of death, his pale face showed a surprised expression. However, Lok Bai's strength wasn't limited to just this. Lok Bai's expression was as calm as ever. He didn't panic in the slightest. Lok Bai pointed his staff at the ground and floated in the air. Looking down from above, Lok could see everything clearly. He could see Chun Xiang, who was dodging on the ground, clearly. Then, let me broaden your horizons. Lok Bai smiled. He aimed his left hand at the broken tree on the ground and spread his fingers. The trees on the ground shook in unison. Then, Lok raised his left hand. Whoosh! All the tree trunks on the ground were pulled into the sky by Lok's gravity. That attack just now had broken at least a dozen trees. At this moment, a dozen trees as thick as the mouth of a bowl were floating in the air at the same time. One could imagine the visual effect. Chun Xiang felt the light in front of him dim. The sky above his head was covered by the tree controlled by Lok Bai. F***CK 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 F***CK. To place one's pride in Mingdu almost jumped up when they saw this scene. Damn, this B***starred is too shameless. Uprooting a tree to smash someone was already a shameless move. At this moment, he actually controlled more than a dozen trees at the same time. Could this Gravity Warlock be any more shameless? Rebirth was a very strict game. Did the system not care about such a bugged class? Hiss! The others looked up at the huge tree that was spread out under Lok Bai's control and gasped. Putting aside the attack power, the attack range was definitely at the level of a forbidden spell. Currently, even the strongest magician probably didn't have such a large attack range. Go! Lok Bai looked down at Chun Xiang on the ground. He waved his left hand slightly and calmly made an attack gesture. In a split second, more than a dozen trees fell from the sky and smashed towards Chun Xiang. It had to be said that it wasn't important whether the gravity warlock was strong or not. What was important was that this was a class that was extremely useful for showing off. Lok Bai floated in the air, his face expressionless as he casually waved his hand, creating such a huge commotion. He seemed like a god, able to destroy the heavens and the earth with just a wave of his hand. This made him seem even more powerful, and everyone present yearned for him. Showing off invisibly was the highest realm of playing games. Boom! Following a loud noise, more than a dozen trees fell to the ground at the same time. The ground trembled slightly from the impact. The area within a radius of more than 10 meters was flattened by Lok Bai's attack. All the trees within the attack range were smashed into pieces and scattered on the ground. Chun Xiang didn't have any movement skills. With such a large attack range, he naturally couldn't dodge in time. Under the watchful eyes of the audience, he was instantly drowned by the attacks that fell from the sky. He's not dead yet? Lok Bai couldn't help but frown when the system didn't announce the results of the match. He looked in the direction where Chun Xiang was smashed in puzzlement. Crash! At this moment there was a clear sound. Chun Xiang drilled out of the rubble, his body emitting a faint golden light. Holy light shield! The moment Lok Bai's attack hit him, Chun Xiang activated invincibility and forcefully withstood Lok Bai's attack. Yo! Lok Bai smiled and said, I forgot that you still have this move. But this time, you definitely won't be able to escape. As he spoke, Lok Bai raised his left hand again. Crash! At the same time, the broken trees on the ground were once again pulled into the air by the gravity spell. This time, the commotion was even greater than before. Apart from the trees that Lok Bai had tossed down, even the trees that had been smashed by the previous attack were all pulled into the air by Lok Bai's gravity spell. There were more than 100 trees in total. What kind of concept was it to have 100 trees floating in the air? Even 100 people in the sky could be described as covering the sky, let alone trees that were much larger than a person. As Lok Bai pulled the broken trees from the ground into the air, the entire arena darkened. When the audience saw this, they all opened their eyes wide. They didn't know how to describe their current feelings. P.S. Hello everyone. Is it snowing where you are? Chapter 1914. Everyone could see it now. Lok Bai's gravity spell could only control a certain number of objects. There was no upper limit. In other words, as long as it was within the spell's range, Lok Bai could grab anything on the ground and use it to attack. They didn't expect Lok Bai's class to be so powerful. However, it made sense when they thought about it. Lok Bai's class had relatively high requirements for the environment. The fact that he could strengthen his attacks to such an extent was entirely due to the environment. With so many trees in the forest, he could naturally control more and more objects. 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3, 3 begets all things, and so on and so forth. However, if it was a monotonous environment, Lok Bai's role was relatively limited to controlling the field. In the game, players didn't have the right to choose the battlefield unless it was a competition. It was understandable for such a restricted class to have such an outstanding effect in a certain battlefield. However, Lok Bai's current performance was a little exaggerated. He was even more of a boss than a boss. Of course, people from Chuanjin all had the temperament of a fierce bandit. Although Chun Xiang was the oldest in Chuanjin, his temperament didn't lose out to the others. Under such circumstances, Chun Xiang naturally wouldn't just sit and wait for his death. Before Lok Bai's attack landed, Chun Xiang raised his staff and threw a cloud of blue poison mist at Lok Bai in midair. Hee hee! Lok Bai looked at the attack flying towards him with disdain and pointed the staff in his right hand at the poison mist. Space distorted. With Lok Bai as the center, a shockwave visible to the naked eye spread out and collided with Chun Xiang's poison mist. Chun Xiang's poison mist bounced back as if it was blown away by the wind. Gravity Loop Shield. It was currently the strongest active defensive skill known. It could block all physical and magical attack. In the previous battle, Lok Bai had used this skill to deflect his opponent's ultimate skill. The audience had jokingly named it Shinra Tensei. This skill could even deflect a warrior's ultimate skill, let alone Chun Xiang's poison mist, which had low priority. Then, Lok Bai swung his left hand down, and a sky full of broken wood fell to the ground like rain. Hong long long long. Smoke and dust rose up from the impact. Chun Xiang had already taken advantage of the time when Lok Bai blocked the poison mist to roll forward to Lok Bai's blind spot. Huh? He's still alive? Seeing that the system notification still hadn't appeared, Lok Bai couldn't help but frown. This guy down there was too tenacious. How could he withstand this? Just as Lok Bai was feeling puzzled, the spring-soaring staff on his back crossed in front of his chest. He clasped his hands together and raised them up, chanting loudly, "Python coil, rise." Boom! As Chun Xiang chanted, a huge python broke out of the ground. It opened its mouth and twisted its body towards Lok Bai, who was in midair. Lok Bai's Heaven's gravitational spell was not a flying spell. It allowed him to hover in the air, but he could not move quickly in the air. Soaring Spring was extremely good at calculating the time of his opponent's skills. Just as Lok Bai froze after releasing his attack, Chun Xiang summoned the python. Lok Bai was unable to move in midair, and he was also in a state of stun. Soaring Spring's skill was released suddenly, and the python was extremely fast. This time, Lok Bai had no way to avoid it and was directly entangled by the python. However, Lok Bai's reaction was extremely fast. It took some time for Chun Xiang's python to completely bind his opponent. Before the python could completely bind him, Lok Bai spread his arms and released a gravity loop shield again. Boom! Space distorted, and a shockwave from the gravitational force spread outwards from Lok Bai. The python that was entangled was immediately freed by the powerful gravitational force. After breaking free, Lok Bai casually grabbed the air, and the broken wood on the ground flew into the air under Lok Bai's control. Lok Bai clenched his left hand, and the broken wood in midair instantly turned into thick wooden stakes that stabbed towards Chun Xiang's python from all directions. Chun Xiang's python was a meat shield-type summoned beast. Its movements were not fast, and it was naturally unable to dodge the attacks coming from all directions. It became a hedgehog on the spot. Fortunately, the python was large and had enough health. After taking a wave of attacks from Lok Bai, it was only on the verge of death. It was not killed on the spot. Seeing this, Chun Xiang hurriedly opened the book of sealing. A black light flew out and sucked the dying python into the book. What? Are you not going to struggle anymore? Seeing that Chun Xiang had summoned the python back, Lok Bai looked down at Chun Xiang with a provocative smile. Then, Lok Bai said, "This time, I'm going to turn you into a hedgehog too. Stop bragging." Facing Lok Bai's provocation, Chun Xiang was neither angry nor flustered. Instead, he smiled and raised his head. "I've already seen through your weakness." "Weakness? Haha." When Lok Bai heard Chun Xiang's words, it was as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. He could not help but laugh. "Do I have a weakness? In this map, I'm a god." Wow, it was really hard to tell that such a humble and low-key guy like Lok Bai would be as arrogant as a Chuanjian dog when he became arrogant. There was no helping it. His profession was equivalent to being arrogant. Being arrogant was fun for a while, and being arrogant would always be fun. It was addictive. Is that so? Chun Xiang laughed. You're bragging so much. Do you have magic output? Yee. When Chun Xiang said this, Lok Bai's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Chun Xiang was right. Although Lok Bai was a warlock, his profession's skills did not have the ability to deal damage. Gravity and gravity shield could only be used for control and defense. All damage output depended on gravity to control objects to attack the target. The damage caused by this kind of throwing ability was all physical damage. However, Lok Bai quickly regained his senses. He did not confirm or deny Chun Xiang's words. Instead, he said ambiguously, "So what? You've used all your methods. Do you think you can hurt me?" "I admit that I can't break through your turtle shell." Chun Xiang laughed. "But you can't hurt me either. Is that so? Then let's try." Lok Bai narrowed his eyes and grabbed at the air with his left hand. Chun Xiang did not dodge. He allowed Lok Bai to grab him in the air. Lok Bai opened and closed his right hand. Countless broken pieces of wood stabbed at Chun Xiang from all directions. Seeing that the broken pieces of wood were about to stab Chun Xiang into a hedgehog, Chun Xiang smiled wretchedly and turned into a cloud of black smoke. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The broken pieces of wood that Lok Bai controlled pierced through Chun Xiang's body and shot in all directions. Chapter 1915. Seeing this scene, Lok Bai's pupils constricted. As an expert, Lok Bai naturally dabbled in all kinds of strange skill effects in the game. It was obvious that Chun Xiang's current skill was completely immune to physical damage. Lok Bai's damage output was all physical damage. This time, it could be said that he had encountered a skill that countered him. Ha ha! At this time, Chun Xiang laughed and said, "How about it? Is there still a need to fight?" "Humph." Lok Bai coldly snorted and said, "Although I can't kill you now, do you think you can kill me?" Indeed, Chun Xiang's atomization skill was only a support skill. In the atomization state, although Chun Xiang could fly in the sky and was immune to physical damage, he could not attack. Moreover, Lok Bai's gravity loop shield had a 360-degree defense and could deflect all kinds of high-priority skills. With Chun Xiang's current state, he could attack a few times and still not hurt Lok Bai. Who knew that Chun Xiang would laugh wretchedly and say, "It doesn't matter. Although I can't hurt you, as long as you don't die, it's a win for me." F***ck. Shameless. Hearing Chun Xiang's words, the audience could not help but curl their lips. This old thing was really shameless. It turned out that this old thing had made up his mind from the beginning to die together with Lok Bai. Before this, Chun Xiang had already killed an opponent, and Lok Bai's battle record was still 0. Chun Xiang definitely wouldn't lose out if he traded 1 for 2. It was no wonder that this wretched guy had this idea. Don't think otherwise. Seeing that Lok Bai was silent, Chun Xiang continued, "When I was testing your damage type, I studied your skills. Your attack skills have a cooldown time of 5.3 seconds, and the range of the skill is 2948. It can be seen that most of your equipment reduces the cooldown of skills and increases the range of skills. The cooldown reduction is no more than 57%, and the range of skills is no less than 64%. Am I right?" As soon as Chun Xiang said this, the originally calm Lok Bai's face turned pale. He felt as if he had been stripped naked and thrown in front of everyone. At first, when Chun Xiang said that he had seen through Lok Bai didn't think much of it. He thought that Chun Xiang had only tested his damage type and dared to spout such nonsense. However, he never imagined that the data that Chun Xiang had just mentioned would be exactly the same as his current attribute. Even the number after the decimal point was exactly the same. The two of them had only fought for a few rounds, and it had only been 3 to 5 minutes. In these few minutes, Lok Bai had been exposed so thoroughly. If Chun Xiang had only calculated Lok Bai's skill cooldowns and range, Lok Bai wouldn't have been so surprised. After all, calculating an opponent's cooldowns and attack range was a basic skill of an expert. However, Chun Xiang's data was so accurate that he could even calculate Lok Bai's attribute. This was shocking. One had to know that when experts fought, they would be wary of their opponent calculating their own skills. So, Lok Bai had tried his best to delay the casting time, but even so, he was still seen clearly. If it wasn't for the fact that Lok Bai's teammates didn't know Lok Bai's specific attributes, Lok Bai would have suspected that there was a traitor in his team. From this, it could be seen that Chun Xiang wasn't just spouting nonsense. He had really seen through Lok Bai. Revealing his attributes was equivalent to being exposed for academic fraud. One could imagine Lok Bai's current mood. His face was filled with fear, anger, and disbelief. The audience still had the basic ability to read people's expressions. Whether Chun Xiang's data was nonsense or not, everyone could clearly see through Lok Bai's expression. It was obvious that Chun Xiang's words weren't just for show. For a moment, the audience and the experts of the major teams were all dumbfounded. In everyone's hearts, Chun Xiang had always been a wretched uncle. Other than his summoning skills that were more eye-catching, his strength wasn't that outstanding in the International Professional League. Instead, he gave people the feeling that he was extremely unreliable. But now, Chun Xiang had revealed such a small trick. It really amazed everyone. In just a few rounds, he was able to accurately calculate his opponent's attributes to 2 decimal places. What kind of godly operation was this? No wonder he could be in the same team as an expert like Wang Yu. This guy really had his scary points. Professional experts had a much higher standard than ordinary people. So, in the eyes of the experts of the major teams, Chun Xiang had a certain level of skill. After all, in yesterday's match, Chun Xiang had played in the center position. Ordinary people couldn't see it, but the top experts could. However, everyone's assessment of Chun Xiang's strength was that he was just an expert with slightly better prediction abilities. But now, Chun Xiang had directly revealed Lok Bai's attribute. It directly shocked all the top experts present. Even though everyone was prepared, they still felt terrified. F***CK. This old dog is becoming more and more abnormal. The old rivals of Team Motley Bunch, Team 9 Provinces, looked at Chun Xiang's erratic movements and let out a heartfelt sigh. Is there anyone in Xuanzhen who isn't abnormal? 5 Lakes 4 Seas laughed and asked back. About this, everyone was silent. Indeed, this group of people in Xuanzhen was one after another. If they weren't abnormal physiologically, then they were abnormal psychologically. Chun Xiang was abnormal in some aspect. It could be said that birds of a feather flocked together with the others in Xuanzhen. How about it? Looking at Lok Bai's surprised expression, Chun Xiang continued, Do we continue to waste everyone's time, or do we end the match in a tie now? Lok Bai was silent for a moment. In the end, he sighed and said, All right, this time we will consider it a tie. Then, Lok Bai opened the menu and sent an expression of a tie. Chun Xiang smiled wretchedly and clicked confirm. With a flash of light, the two of them were teleported off the stage. System announcement. Third match, both sides are in a tie. The current score is 2-1. F***CK. That was close. After being teleported off the stage, Chun Xiang was so nervous that he was sweating profusely. While wiping his sweat, he rejoiced. F***CK. If I were to waste any more time, my atomization state would end. I didn't expect this brat to fall for it so easily. Fortunately, he didn't know the cooldown time of my skill. The cooldown time of Chun Xiang's atomization skill was not short. If the battle had continued, the chances of Chun Xiang losing were quite high. Therefore, he staked everything on one throw to trick Lok Bai. He never thought that a smart guy like Lok Bai would be so easily tricked. Chapter 1916. Of course, it was reasonable for Lok Bai to be intimidated by Spring Xiang. Being able to understand his opponent's attributes after just a few rounds, Spring Xiang's ability was simply too terrifying. Not to mention Lok Bai, if anyone else saw Spring Xiang's ability, they would probably make the same choice as Lok Bai. I feel that if you continue fighting, you might still have a chance. After Lok Bai left the stage, the Templar Apostle followed up and said calmly, "His atomization skill definitely has a time limit." "I know." Hearing the Templar Apostle's words, Lok Bai calmly nodded and said, "But when he finishes atomization, his other skills will also be off cooldown." Speaking up to this point, Lok Bai looked at Spring Xiang with lingering fear and said, "This guy has already seen through me. I couldn't even kill him when he was on the brink of death, and I don't have the confidence to beat him when I'm at full strength. I didn't expect the ragtag team to have such a terrifying expert other than those three guys." "Not necessarily." The Templar Apostle laughed and said, "If he was really as strong as you think he is, he wouldn't have been in such a difficult situation in the previous round." Lok Bai couldn't help but be taken aback when he heard this. He immediately realized that he had been tricked and immediately said with some embarrassment, "Sorry." The Templar Apostle continued to laugh and said, "It's all right. We didn't let them score anyway, so we still have a chance." As soon as the Templar Apostle finished speaking, the two light pillars stopped at the same time. The Templar Battle Team's player was Jeff, while the Ragtag Team's player was Wang Yu. "It's over." Seeing that the opponent was actually Wang Yu, Lok Bai's face revealed a look of despair. Since he had drawn a king bomb, it was obvious that he wouldn't have a chance in the second round. Wow! Seeing that Wang Yu had been chosen in the middle of the second round, the audience was in an uproar. They all mourned for the Templar Battle Team's luck. These guys had the looks of Europeans, but deep down, they were all unlucky people. Not only did they lose so badly in the first round, but in the second round, they encountered the Ragtag Team's final boss, Iron Ox. What kind of luck did they have? Even the Ragtag Bunch Battle Team felt aggrieved for the Templar Battle Team. The motley crew had more than a dozen people, but they just had to draw Wang Yu. Even if they couldn't win, they shouldn't have any complaints. This was all arranged by the heavens, and the heavens had arranged the most. With a flash of light, Wang Yu and Jeff were teleported to the arena. Jeff had seen Wang Yu's methods before. Recalling that scene with Yu Huiqing, Jeff still had a shadow in his heart. Now that he was fighting against Wang Yu, Jeff's heart was in utter disbelief. How could a single person defeat such a freak? Experts were experts not only because of their strength, but also because of their control of the battlefield and their estimation of the strength of both sides. Although Jeff was a man of few words, his battle IQ was extremely high, not inferior to Wang Yu at all. He naturally knew how big the gap between him and Wang Yu was. A few seconds before the start of the match, Jeff had already formulated the perfect strategy for this match. As the countdown ended, the match began. Wang Yu was a simple and crude person. Things that could be solved with violence were nothing in Wang Yu's eyes. Of course, this kind of competition wouldn't specify any so-called strategy. After all, no matter how perfect the strategy was, it was useless in the face of powerful strength. After the match began, Wang Yu jumped and directly rushed towards Jeff's direction without saying anything. Jeff's eyes turned cold. He immediately flashed a few meters back and waved the cane in his right hand, drawing a big circle in front of him. Wang Yu's speed was extremely fast. In an instant, he rushed in front of Jeff. At the moment when Wang Yu was about to kick Jeff's head, a huge teleportation door appeared between Jeff and Wang Yu. Seeing this, Wang Yu immediately had a series of question marks on his head. At this time, it was too late for him to dodge, and he jumped directly into the circle. At this point, let's talk about Wang Yu's dodging ability. In Wang Yu's previous battle career, Unless it was a world-destroying forbidden spell or an attack launched by hundreds or thousands of people at the same time, Wang Yu would rarely be hit by an opponent's attack. The reason why Wang Yu had such abnormal dodging ability was entirely because of Wang Yu's killing intent detection. As long as someone locked their gaze on Wang Yu, it would definitely be detected by Wang Yu, and he would be able to dodge in advance. With Wang Yu's reaction speed, if he was prepared, he could naturally dodge infinitely. However, Jeff's teleportation door wasn't an offensive skill, and when Jeff used it, he didn't lock onto Wang Yu. Instead, he used the teleportation door to protect himself as much as possible. Under such circumstances, of course, Wang Yu wouldn't be able to detect it in advance. Unlike Jeff, Wang Yu didn't have a deep impression of Jeff. After all, Wang Yu had killed countless experts and would never deliberately remember someone, so he didn't realize that Jeff was using the teleportation door. Seeing Jeff's magic staff from afar, Wang Yu thought that the kid's periarthritis was acting up again. In this gap of negligence, Wang Yu fell into Jeff's trap. After jumping into the teleportation door, Wang Yu only felt his vision blur. When he reacted, the forest around him was still the same, but the familiar opponent was completely gone. In order to get as far away from Wang Yu as possible, Jeff opened the teleportation door as far as possible. The dark forest was a very large map, and poor Wang Yu was directly teleported to the edge of the dark forest. As a protagonist based on the author himself, Wang Yu could be said to have no flaws, be it in terms of personality or strength. The only shortcoming was that he rarely went out alone, so he didn't have a strong sense of direction. In layman's terms, he had no sense of direction. This was especially true in this forest. Looking at the endless dark forest in front of him, Wang Yu broke out in a cold sweat. Under such circumstances, it was really difficult for Wang Yu to chase after a mage who could use spatial magic. Not to mention the fact that Wang Yu couldn't make a detour in this situation, even if Wang Yu's Qinggong had the ability to fly and survey the map from a high altitude. Trying to find someone in this vast forest would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Moreover, what was Jeff's class? A spatial mage. If this kid wanted to escape, so what if he could fly? No matter how fast he could fly, could he catch up with spatial jump? For a moment, the arena fell into a stalemate. As expected of an expert among experts, Jeff's battle IQ was very high, far surpassing the opponents he had met before. Facing an opponent like Wang Yu that was impossible to defeat, Jeff's thoughts were very clear, and he chose to banish his opponent far away from himself. Chapter 1917. Jeff's current situation was the same as what Chun Xiang had said in the previous match. Although I can't beat you, you can't beat me either. As long as it's a draw, I'll win this round. It was said that one couldn't be too immoral. Karma really came quickly. Wang Yu's motley crew was different from Lok Bai's for the Templar team. Lok Bai and Chun Xiang were in a draw. The Templar team had other experts, but the motley crew only had 3 experts. It wasn't easy for them to randomly pick Wang Yu, but he was forced to a draw. It was as if Wang Yu had lost a 3. One could imagine how gloomy the motley crew was feeling. Surrender. After making sure that Wang Yu was thrown to the edge of the map, Jeff revealed a cunning smile. He looked around calmly and typed a Chinese character on the public chat. No. Wang Yu saw the message on the public chat and firmly rejected the idea of surrendering. What a joke. Wang Yu was a martial arts grandmaster. She had been undefeatable throughout her life. She had never cowered in front of a god-tier boss. Jeff had only used a trick. Asking Wang Yu to surrender was no different from a fool's dream. Draw. Of course, Jeff also knew that Wang Yu would definitely not surrender. Seeing that Wang Yu refused to surrender, Jeff sent another message. Seeing Jeff's second message, Wang Yu hesitated. Wang Yu understood his current situation. Not to mention looking for people in the forest, Wang Yu didn't even know where he was. If he dragged this on, it would only be a draw. After thinking for a moment, Wang Yu sighed and replied, "Yes." Jeff smiled and sent a draw request. After Wang Yu confirmed, the system announced that the fifth round was a draw. The Templar team won 1 round, lost 2 rounds, and drew 2 rounds. There was only 1 slot left for the second round. The Motley Crue team still had 2 slots left. However, looking at the remaining players on the field, Team Templar's chances of winning were still relatively high. After all, the Ragtag team's overall standard was much lower than the Templar battle team's. Judging from the quality of the Templar battle team's experts, whether or not the Ragtag team could win the next few matches would depend entirely on luck. As it turned out, the Templar battle team's luck wasn't that great. After flashing for 5 seconds, the beam of light finally stopped on a thin player wearing a white priest robe. "Oh my God! What did we do wrong?" Lok Bai wanted to cry when he saw the players on his side being chosen. The heart of the Templar was one of the 2 divine occupations of the Templar battle team. Occupation: Holy Priest. In the previous round, their opponent had been a freak like Wang Yu, but in this round, their opponent was a cleric. In fact, from a player's perspective, Templar Heart was definitely a top-notch expert. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was the world's #1 priest. But no matter how strong a priest was, he was still a priest. Support classes basically didn't have much damage output. Their only explosive attack was self-destruction. Moreover, Templar Heart was different from Wuji. He was a proper support class and knew his responsibilities. His skill tree was also filled with buffs and recovery skills. He was a proper great priest, unlike the crooked Ragtag team. A support class with a bunch of damage output skills. What the hell was this? Looking at the side of the Motley Crue, there was an ugly man in a black robe sitting under the pillar of light. The ugly man was holding a flamboyant red magic staff in his hand. The ugly person was none other than Xuanzhen's guardian archmage, Mingdu Li. The title of guardian archmage was given by Mingdu himself. Since there were no other mages in Xuanzhen's battle lineup, no one could be bothered to refute him. As the saying goes, every version has a god, and every version has a mage god. As the game's Sun class, the mage was definitely the existence with the highest damage output out of all the classes. They were known as the Head Harvester. Regardless of whether it was PvP or PvE, the mage class was ridiculously powerful. Among all classes, damage output classes were the player's favorite. Although both classes were mages, the audience for priests and mages was much smaller, of course. This didn't mean that players didn't like priests. It was just that they usually liked to let others play as priests to support their mages. A priest with the lowest damage output against a mage with the highest damage output. There was no need to compare who was stronger and who was weaker. However, Templar Heart was also a top-tier expert and had the pride of an expert. Even though he knew that there was a huge disparity between the 2 classes, he still resolutely appeared on the stage. Templar Heart glanced at the sloppy Mingdu across from him. He placed his right hand on the bridge of his nose and subconsciously made a gesture of pushing up his glasses. His eyes narrowed as he revealed a friendly smile. Seeing Templar Heart's expression, Mingdu's heart skipped a beat. Templar Heart's seemingly friendly smile reminded Mingdu of another priest, causing Mingdu to subconsciously raise his guard against the opponent before him. He decided to make the first move to gain the upper hand. As the countdown ended, Mingdu raised his staff. A lightning bolt as thick as a water bucket descended from the sky and struck Templar Heart from above. Compared to the hot-blooded strength-based classes, the battle style of mages was clearly much higher. In the era where other classes were still fighting with their swords, mages were already able to cast special effects with a wave of their hand. Absolute damage output was Mingdu's favorite. It was simple, crude, and direct. It was in line with Mingdu's character of using underhanded means at the slightest disagreement. Although Mingdu wasn't weak in terms of mechanical skills, he still couldn't compare to top-tier experts. However, in terms of attributes, especially in terms of spell power and spell increase, if Mingdu dared to claim second place, no one would dare claim first place. This violent lightning was Mingdu's strongest single-target damage skill. When this lightning bolt descended, not to mention a cloth-armored priest, even a thick-skinned shield warrior would be blasted half to death. However, facing Mingdu's attack, Templar Heart had no intention of dodging. It didn't even make a move to block. Instead, it openly welcomed the attack. Crap. So tough? Boom. With a loud bang, under Mingdu's astonished gaze, the violent thunder spell smashed onto the Templar Heart's head. At the same time, Templar Heart's body emitted a holy light. Holy light shield. In the end, Templar Heart was a priest. Invulnerability gave him confidence. Mages were all born to play with special effect. This was especially true for lightning-type mages and light-type priests. When they fought, it was a competition of who was brighter. When the violent lightning spell's radiance collided with the holy light shield's radiance, an even more dazzling light burst forth. In the arena, Mingdu and the audience outside the arena subconsciously closed their eyes. At this moment, Templar Heart, who was at the center of the glowing light, revealed an almost imperceptible smile under the bright light. At the same time, Templar Heart raised the staff in his hand. A weak flame fluttered towards Mingdu. Chapter 1918. Holy Flame. The priest's silent skill was the natural enemy of mages. After all, mages relied heavily on skills. If they couldn't use skills, they would lose 90% of their combat power, and could only engage in melee combat with their opponent. Although this skill had a long cast time, a short cast range, and an obvious cast time, it was an extremely rare lock-on skill in Rebirth. Once it was cast, no matter how high one's evasion was, they would not be able to dodge it. As a top-tier support, Templar Heart wasn't very good at PvP compared to his teammates, but compared to other players, he was definitely an expert. Under the cover of the spell's effects, he silently tossed Holy Flame at Mingdu. By the time Mingdu discovered his opponent's spell, it was already too late for him to dodge. Thud, the Holy Flame landed on Mingdu's body and emitted a faint sound. At the same time, a line of ellipses appeared above Mingdu's head. Silence! Haha! Seeing this, the corner of Templar Heart's mouth curled up into a smile. He then dashed toward Mingdu. As a mage class, the priest's movement speed growth was the same as that of a mage. For professional PvP experts, agility was indispensable. Templar Heart was a top-tier priest in a battle team, so he naturally wouldn't neglect his agility attribute. On the other hand, Mingdu was an extremist in the game. Not only did he focus all his attribute points on intelligence, but his equipment also leaned towards intelligence. There was only one belief in his heart: damage output. Without his skills, Radiant was no match for Templar's Heart in terms of escape. Soon, Templar Heart arrived in front of Mingdu. He clasped his hands together, and a dazzling holy light burst forth from his body. Martyrdom. This skill's effect was similar to a shield warrior's taunt. The difference was that Martyrdom could pull all attacks onto the user, while Taunt could only force the target to attack the user physically. However, Mingdu was currently silenced and couldn't use any skills. So, he couldn't help but raise his staff and smash it at Templar Heart. The instant Mingdu's staff landed on his body, Templar Heart rushed forward and grabbed onto Mingdu's staff tightly. Then, a faint glow appeared on Templar Heart's body. Holy shit! Looking at the radiance of the Templar Heart, Mingdu broke out in cold sweat. Everyone from the Motley Bunch battle team turned their heads and looked at Wuji with disdain. Under Wuji's influence, all the priests in the game had started to self-destruct. Even an expert like the Holy Heart had put down his pride and used such a dirty method. Unlike Wuji, which was an unorthodox church, the Holy Heart was the benchmark of the profession, and it was the faith of all priests. If even he played like this, one could imagine what the priest class system in Rebirth would be like in the future. Imagine if you were singing and fighting a boss outside the city. Suddenly, a priest ran over and blew you up. How disgusting would that be? The cleric class was originally a holy class that focused on saving lives and healing. Now, after this competition, the cleric class would probably be thoroughly blackened and turned into a heretic that everyone despised. You! The motley crew pointed at Wuji and lamented, "What a sin! What does it have to do with me?" Wuji said with a nonchalant expression, "The self-destruct class is an imported product. The foreigners are much more professional than us. Our country doesn't have such a radical guy." "Alright, stop talking." At this moment, Wang Yu hurriedly reached out and grabbed Wuji's mouth. He said with lingering fear, "If you continue talking, this book will be banned. You better shut up." Boom! Just as everyone was talking nonsense, the Holy Heart suddenly exploded. The explosion shone with a dazzling holy light, and the Holy Heart even revealed a victorious smile. Obviously, the Holy Heart's HP was much higher than Mingdu's. If this self-destruct went on, Mingdu would definitely be blown to smithereens. The heart of the Holy Church was also a crafty person. This fella didn't hug Mingdu like Wuji did. Instead, he grabbed onto Mingdu's staff in an extremely gentlemanly manner. If Mingdu wanted to avoid the self-destruct, the only way was to let go of the staff. Otherwise, he would be blown to death. The light effect of Mingdu's staff was extremely arrogant. One look and anyone could tell that it was a top-tier item. If Mingdu chose to let go, the staff would belong to the Holy Heart. If he didn't let go, the Holy Heart would win this match. No matter what happened, the Holy Heart wouldn't suffer a loss. As the self-destruct was released, Heaven's Heart felt the staff in his hand disappear. With regards to Mingdu's choice, Heaven's Heart wasn't surprised at all. In this kind of situation, professional players might throw away their equipment in exchange for victory. After all, their responsibility was to win. Equipment was a consumable. Even if they threw away a set of equipment, they could reassemble a new set in the shortest time possible. However, for a grassroots player like Mingdu, he definitely wouldn't have such a thought. However, when the light dissipated, the system notification that Holy Heart was waiting for did not appear. After a long time, the system notification that he had won did not appear. Holy Heart was startled. At this moment, a familiar voice came from behind Holy Heart. "Hey, brat, you're quite ruthless." Luckily, I was prepared. Hearing this familiar voice, the Templar Heart quickly turned around and saw Mingdu's left hand forming a strange hand seal. His right hand was holding a crimson staff as he smiled at the Templar Heart. Hand seal casting. If the Templar's heart had directly grabbed onto Mingdu, then Mingdu might have been killed by the explosion. However, the Templar's heart thought itself clever and only grabbed onto Mingdu's staff. This gave Mingdu the opportunity to form a single hand seal and use flash at the critical moment to avoid the Templar's heart's self-destruction. Hee hee. Seeing Holy Heart's expression, Mingdu was very satisfied. He raised the staff in his right hand and swung it horizontally at Holy Heart's head. As a top-tier expert, Holy Heart's mental fortitude was naturally very strong. Seeing that Mingdu didn't die, Holy Heart was only slightly stunned. Without a word, he raised the staff in his hand and cast a flash spell at Mingdu. Everyone only saw a flash of light before a blinding symbol appeared above Mingdu's head. After blinding Mingdu, Holy Heart turned around and ran, rapidly increasing the distance between him and Mingdu. At the same time, he cast a few healing spells, recovering some of the HP bar above his head. "Ha ha!" Mingdu sneered and extended his hands forward. The staff in his hand floated in the air. At the same time, Mingdu's hands started forming hand seals. Not good. What kind of person was Holy Heart? Seeing this hand seal, he knew that Mingdu was about to cast a spell. But now that the distance between them had increased, it was already too late for Holy Heart to turn around and interrupt. Roar! Following a dragon's roar, Mingdu opened his mouth and 4 fire dragons shot out from Mingdu's mouth, flying towards Holy Heart from all 4 directions. Chapter 1919. Raging Dragon's Breath. This skill could attack a target from 4 directions. If the target didn't have a blink skill, it was basically impossible to dodge. Holy Heart was a support-type cleric. Naturally, his skill tree was mostly support-type magic. He could heal and recover, but he didn't have any combat skills like blink. The only invulnerability skill that could block all damage was still on cooldown. Unable to dodge, he could only use his back to take Mingdu's dragon's breath head-on. Although Mingdu was a lightning-type mage, his fire attribute was also extremely high. He also had the number 1 godly fire-type weapon, the Vermilion Bird Staff, in his hand. His fire-type magic damage was even higher than lightning-type magic damage. Moreover, Dragon's Breath was the king of fire-type magic. The damage of this thick spit had far exceeded everyone's imagination. Not to mention that Holy Heart was still in a red blood state. Even if he was at full HP, he would still be dead after taking a hit from Mingdu. Rumble! 4 fire dragons smashed into the back of the Templar Heart at the same time. Holy Heart didn't even have the time to grunt before he was blasted into smithereens and teleported off the stage. System notice. 6th round, Motley Crowd Battle Team Mingdu wins. 2nd round has ended. Both teams will take a break. Below the stage, on the Templar's side, Templar's Heart, who had just lost their match, had a depressed look on their face. In the 6th round, Holy Heart truly felt wronged for losing. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Even if Templar's Heart wasn't a combat class, its strength was still there for all to see. If Templar's Heart fought Radiant in a standard manner, even if Templar's Heart couldn't kill Radiant, it could easily drag out the match until it ended and end in a draw. However, Holy Heart didn't know what was good for him and chose to self-destruct against Mingdu. Little did he know that Mingdu actually had a shameless skill like hand-casting. Furthermore, the Templar's Heart didn't even think about where this self-destructing style came from. With a despicable teammate like Wuji, how could Radiant City not be on guard against such a shameless style of play? If he lost to Radiant City, he could only blame that brat for being too full of himself. In the end, he gave Mingdu a kill. On the Ragtag Bunch side, killing 3 people earned them 3 points. With the addition of the 2 kills, they earned 5 points in the 2nd round, while the St. Church Battle Team only earned 1 point. After 2 matches, the total score was 9-2, with the Ragtag team leading by 7 points. Everyone felt like they were dreaming about this score. As a grassroots team, the Ragtag Bunch Battle Team's strength was very transparent. Throughout the competition, they had been meticulous in their calculations and tricks. Although they had won the competition, the majority of the audience was crying out for their opponent's injustice. After all, esports depended on hard power. The audience wouldn't be convinced by a motley team's method of victory. However, in this match, the motley crew displayed a strength that no one had expected. The Templar Battle Team was one of the teams that had the highest chance of winning this competition. They were so strong that even a strong team like Pantheon wouldn't dare to say that they could win. However, it was hard to accept that they had such a pitiful record after 2 matches. It was no wonder that people would say that he had been bribed. Anyone would be suspicious in such a situation. The 2nd match ended. After exiting the gaming cabin, both teams returned to their respective resting rooms. Holy Heart was still feeling depressed about the previous match. At this moment, he lowered his head with guilt written all over his face. At the same time, he muttered to himself, "Why did I self-destruct? If I ran, he definitely wouldn't be able to catch up to me. Alright, don't blame yourself anymore, brother." Seeing that Holy Heart still hadn't recovered from the shadow of the previous defeat, Locke patted Holy Heart's shoulder and said, "It's just a mere 7 points difference. The last match has a total of 20 points. We don't care about this small difference. Is our plan reliable? Holy Heart was a little doubtful. What if we fail? Such a large point difference can't be easily reduced. After the previous battle, the Templar Heart had gained a better understanding of the ragtag team. The reason why this group of people could fight their way to the finals was not just because they were sinister and cunning. Although their strength and mechanical skills were far from being a top-tier professional player, they all had unique skills. Who knew when they would come up with a trick to turn the tables? Such an unstable factor was the most unreliable part of the plan. Don't worry, Locke smiled and said. Hasn't their biggest weakness already been exposed in front of us? As long as we grasp this point, this group of people will lose without a doubt. Is it that easy? That guy is very strong. Holy Heart frowned and said. Hee hee. Locke laughed and said, the third match is our home field. If we can't win even in the trap we have set up, then this is definitely the Lord's decision. We are willing to respect the Lord's will. All right. Holy Heart was clearly a devout believer. Seeing that Locke had even mentioned the Lord, Holy Heart could only shut his mouth. Compared to Templar's Heart's cautiousness, Radiant, who had just won the last match, was still bragging to his teammates about how brilliant he was and how retarded and trashy his opponents were. It felt as if the ragtag team had already won the entire match. That's enough. Shut up. Wuji rolled his eyes at Mingdu and forcefully interrupted Mingdu's bragging. Look at your proud face. They didn't even fight seriously in the second match. Otherwise, you would have won. Jealousy. It's definitely jealousy. Mingdu looked at Wuji with disdain and said, jealousy will make you even uglier. I've decided. I'm going to brag about this match for a year and piss you off to death. I also think that they didn't fight seriously. Wang Yu rubbed his chin and agreed. Don't talk bull with a 0 win rate. Mingdu began to ridicule Locke. Wang Yu was silent for a moment. He turned his head and asked Wuji, as the team leader, do I have the authority to kick a member out of the battle team? Of course. Wuji nodded and said calmly, those who are kicked out of the battle team won't even get a basic salary, let alone a bonus. Dad. Mingdu's face darkened when he heard that. He directly knelt in front of Wang Yu. The arrogant attitude just now was gone. Go go go. Go play somewhere else. Wang Yu was too lazy to pay attention to this shameless person. He waved his hand and pulled Mingdu to the side. He turned to ask Wuji, how should we fight the next match? The next match will be very difficult. Wuji pondered and said, we must be prepared for both sides. Why? Mingdu came over again and said, we are now leading by 7 points. Why is it difficult? Do you think the difference of 7 points is very big? Wuji frowned and said, the winner of the last match will get 10 extra points. Are you worried about the opponent's home ground? Wang Yu asked again. It doesn't matter if it's their home ground or not. Wuji said, the important thing is that our weakness has been seen through by them. P.S. I wrote the wrong chapter number and I made a few wrong chapters. I'm so dizzy. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.